Chapter 182. Yan Xiaoxiao had not seen Lin Jun for a long time. Ever since Gu Nan took Lin Jun away to the astral realm as a replacement for Yan Xiaoxiao, the two of them had not seen each other since. So the Yan kingdom is backed by your family? What about the Tianyun sect? Yan Xiaoxiao and Lin Jun chatted for a while and finally learned some secret. The three forces had been at odds for so many years, so she naturally had a good understanding of each country and one sect. However, the people of this world did not know who was behind them. Lin Jun was a very strange existence. After all these days, her cultivation had not changed at all, and she remained at the peak of the innate stage. Even her appearance did not change. It was as if time could not take effect on her, whether she wanted it or not. I think she's from another planet. Planet? The upper realm is really interesting. Yes, it's very big, and there are many powerful people there. How enviable. In front of Lin Jun, Yan Xiaoxiao did not seem to be the ruler who controlled half of the continent. She hugged her knees and squatted on her seat. Her appearance was very ungraceful, but her smile was very bright. At some point, the two of them stopped at the same time. Then, Lin Jun stared at her and said, "Have you ever thought of leaving everything here and leaving with me?" Yan Xiaoxiao was silent for a while, and finally shook her head gently. "I don't want to go there." "Is it because of your teacher?" Lin Jun smiled and tilted her head. "No." Yan Xiaoxiao did not seem to hesitate. "Back then, I just wanted to see what it felt like to stand at the top of the world. What about now?" "Now it has become a kind of obsession. When a person spent a long time doing something, but did not get the expected return, some people would continue to do it regardless of the cost. Yan Xiaoxiao was like this, and so was Gu Nan. The principle of soul exchange in the immortal and demon world had almost become an obsession in his heart. Even though he knew that there wasn't much meaning to it, and that it wouldn't hinder him from leveling up even if he didn't have any absolutely loyal subordinates, Gu Nan still wanted to study it thoroughly. This was like a professional player encountering a poisonous map. He would either reject it from the start, or once he invested time in it, he would not be able to resist the urge to clear it. He didn't have to eat, he didn't have to sleep, he just had to pass this map. Gu Nan was now in a state of half-obsession. Fortunately, he had not completely lost his mind. While he was researching, he would do some serious things. Somewhere in the skies of the immortal demon world, a figure tore open the void and slowly descended. Only Gu Nan, who had already stepped into the fourth tier, could do such a thing. Gu Nan stepped into the immortal demon world. The repulsive force of the world came as expected, but Gu Nan did not meekly accept it as usual. He paused for a moment, and a faint light flashed in his heart. An indescribable power immediately flowed through his body. The repulsive force of the immortal demon world gradually dissipated under the illumination of this power, and only a small portion remained. The repulsive force of the world indeed exists in the form of laws, and it's also affected by the magic-breaking crystal. Gu Nan smiled in satisfaction. The magic-breaking attribute could break all laws, although it was limited by its grade and probably had no effect on those who had completed their first class of cultivation. However, the immortal demon world was clearly not at that level yet. At this moment, Gu Nan had already fused the magic-breaking crystal into his body, and his heart was the container. Luo Fei only dared to use her arm to absorb some of the power of the crystal, but Gu Nan dared to fuse it with his heart. That was the difference between their physique. The higher the level, the greater the advantage that the body of the god of evil would bring to Gu Nan. After getting rid of the repulsive force of the world, Gu Nan felt that he had delayed his stay for at least a month. He then landed on the ground in satisfaction. "Lord, the things that you ordered are ready." Third Last had been waiting there for a long time, and she hurriedly stepped forward when she saw Gu Nan. Since Red Tail had to guard the Xianwang planet, there were only a few members of the White Mist Society here, and Third Last was one of the commanders. "Okay. Gu Nan nodded and soon arrived at the laboratory that he requested under the lead of 3 last. There was already an unconscious man prepared there, and he was either a vessel for reincarnation or a normal person. In the immortal demon world, the soul of the reincarnated person would definitely only be half of the original, and thus would not be of any value as an experimental material. Hence, they could only use the natives. "Let's begin," Gu Nan said after checking the equipment briefly. The shallow layer of the soul has been stripped, output of the power of shadow beginning to infect the soul. Drawing the third exchange array pattern, transferring the soul, abnormal. After a series of familiar processes, the results made Gu Nan dumbfounded. His divine soul did not succeed, nor did it fail. Instead, it entered a strange state. The power of shadow did not replace half of the divine soul like the world origin did, and the two were clearly separated in the target's body. Gu Nan's power entered the subject's body, but it was in the form of entanglement, distortion, and complete integration with the divine soul. Will this work? Gu Nan was not sure, and he had no choice but to say to third last, "Wake him up." The stimulating drug was soon injected into the subject's body, and he began to wake up. At the moment that the man woke up, Gu Nan had a very strange experience. He seemed to have become another person, and he could easily read the thoughts, emotions, and thoughts of the other party. He could see everything that the other party saw and sense everything that the other party sensed. He was like an omniscient God who understood the other party better than himself. Isn't this the attribute sheet in the game? Gu Nan lamented in his heart as he went through all the information of this person. In the God of Evil game, the players did not have their own attribute sheet, but after establishing the Kingdom of God, they could view the attribute sheet of the units in the Kingdom of God. The way the attribute sheet was presented was similar to how it was now, where all the information was presented directly in front of the players, and not through the ancient method of listing data. The advantage of this method was very obvious. The large amount of information presented and summarized was far more complete than a few dry words, and the players would not be able to make a mistake about any of the NPCs. However, why would the method of viewing the units in the Kingdom of God appear in the immortal and demon world? Why would the method of exchanging half of the divine soul in the immortal and demon world be the method of viewing the attribute sheet of the units in the Kingdom of God? Gu Nan frowned, and a few pieces of information slowly connected in his mind. He seemed to be able to come to a somewhat strange conclusion. If exchanging half of the divine soul with the world origin was the essence of the players viewing the attribute sheet, then... Chapter 183. Gu Nan did not know what the Starlords called their world in the heavenly worlds, and he was more used to calling it the Kingdom of God. Gu Nan found it funny and infuriating at the same time that he had wasted 3 months of time on an experiment that had led him to such a conclusion. However, if the divine demon world was really a broken Kingdom of God, he would not have wasted the past 3 months. A broken Kingdom of God was still a Kingdom of God. The difference between a natural plane and a Kingdom of God was like the difference between stones that could be seen everywhere on the roadside and gemstones that had been carved halfway. There would definitely be treasures in the stones, but wouldn't it be better to use semi-finished gemstones? As for the traces left behind by the predecessors, as an elder who had experienced hundreds of kingdoms of God, Gu Nan did not feel pressured at all. In the early years, Gu Nan had been tempted by the divine demon world and planned to use it as a reserve for the Kingdom of God in the future. Hence, he had arranged a lot of backups here. However, due to the appearance of the private instance dungeon, he temporarily lost interest, but it was not too late to pick it up now. Gu Nan did not know if he was lucky or not, but he got a private instance dungeon on the first day he translated the will of the world. However, he did not encounter another one for the next 3 months. Actually, that was normal. In order to devour the complete origin of a world, he would have to complete all the missions in the world. How could it be that easy? He was indeed lucky to have encountered one on the first day, and he even accidentally encountered Zwa, which caused so much trouble. At the thought of Zwa, Gu Nan could not help but feel a headache. Until now, he still could not figure out why that fellow would target him and what his motive was. Was it because of the starry world? That was unlikely. The existence of the starry world was not deliberately hidden, and Zwa could have found it long ago. Is there something else on me that this high-rank Star Lord is interested in? Lord Three Tails. Gu Nan's experimental subject had already woken up. He did not recognize Gu Nan, but he recognized Three Tails. He hurriedly bowed. Three Tails ignored him and simply waited for Gu Nan's instructions. Let him go down. Gu Nan said casually, look for historical legends, strange landscapes, or places like the major forbidden areas. Ah, okay. Three Last was shocked by his strange request, but she still answered quickly. According to Gu Nan's experience, if a god's divine kingdom did not shatter after his death, it meant that either the god was not completely dead, or something else had replaced the god to oversee the operation of the divine kingdom. And the immortal demon world would spontaneously replace the soul of the reincarnated person. Presumably the second situation was more common. What's more, Gu Nan had a big treasure sword in his hand. The last thing he was afraid of was a powerful being who was on the verge of death. If he was pushed too far, he would suffer true damage and teach him a lesson. And if the divine kingdom was taken over, then the overseer would definitely still be within the divine kingdom. The place where it was located would definitely be a little strange and not ordinary. In the Blue Dragon Hall headquarters, Lin Jun and Yen Xiaoxiao's conversation continued. Are you confident? Lin Jun's voice sounded very worried. Of course not. Yen Xiaoxiao smiled helplessly. I have to give it a try. Otherwise, my existence seems to be meaningless. She had climbed all the way from an ordinary rich lady to where she was today. Her experiences were so legendary that even 2 novels would not be enough to describe them. However, as her status got higher and higher, the emptiness in Yen Xiaoxiao's heart also got heavier. She was already the Hall Master of Blue Dragon Hall and the most powerful woman in the world. However, she had no relatives, friends, or even someone she could confide in. Fortunately, Lin Jun came today. Sometimes I wonder, wasn't he like this back then too? Yen Xiaoxiao said softly, and the figure of that person seemed to flash past her eyes again. It was the man who had always pursued greater power and never stopped. He saw human lives as worthless and loneliness as nothing. He despised all the rules in this world. If there were a god in this world, he would probably be like that, right? Even though more than 20 years had passed, Yen Xiaoxiao was still the person who understood Gu Nan the best in the world. He might be. Lin Jun smiled bitterly. She knew more than Yen Xiaoxiao. She knew how Gu Nan left the Red Carp and killed his way to the 6-star region. She didn't know what happened after that, but it shouldn't have made much of a difference. He would always be the strongest. Yen Xiaoxiao seemed to have understood something and stopped talking about this topic. She looked as if a huge burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Thank you, Yen Xiaoxiao said. I've endured for so many years. It's time for me to be presumptuous for once. Lin Jun looked at her blankly. She didn't know what she meant. She was here to persuade him to stop. Not. Yen Xiaoxiao had already stood up and slowly walked out of the hall. She said to the attendant beside her, call all the people in the hall who are considered high-ranking officials to me. Hall Master, what are you trying to do? The follower was startled and blurted out. Yen Xiaoxiao ignored his disrespect. Instead, she smiled and said, decisive battle. In the endless void, a black-haired girl was sitting quietly on a black lotus. She looked forward coldly. It was young girl No Return. In front of her, there were 2 people standing on her left and right. They were a man and a woman. The 2 styles were very different. The man smiled like a Maitreya Buddha, but the woman's face was wooden like a fool. The immortal and demon gathering is coming. Buddha, please stay. The man smiled at No Return. Xiao Langjun, obscure. No Return's cold eyes swept across the two. Don't think that I won't kill you just because you're on the Star Ocean platform. How can I compete with Buddha? Xiao Langjun seemed to be always smiling. I just want to ask Buddha to stay for a while. Before young girl No Return could speak, the woman called, obscure, next to her spoke first. How long are you going to keep her? Xiao Langjun looked at her in surprise. His face was just short of saying, can you not be so honest? But since he was already asked, he couldn't not answer. He could only maintain his smile. Buddha has reincarnated for 10,000 lives. Why don't you sit here for 10,000 years? This was not a very funny joke. Obscure still had a wooden expression. No Return's gaze didn't even waver. But the next moment, a palm with monstrous demonic intent had already appeared in front of Xiao Langjun. The Buddhism sect was one of the rare lineages that maintained the refinement of the corporeal body. Therefore, the Buddhist experts often fought with their corporeal bodies. This palm came too fast and too sudden. It was also too mysterious. Xiao Langjun's expression instantly changed. He almost couldn't even maintain his smile. What are you waiting for? He shouted. His right hand grasped at the void. He couldn't dodge in time. He could only pull out a long saber from the void and use it to block the palm. But young girl No Return's power was far beyond his imagination. Just this palm was enough to shatter his laws. He entered a heavily injured state. He could only flee toward the nearest world behind him. According to the reason why they blocked the way before, this was the immortal and demon world. I'm really screwed this time. I didn't expect that old monster's strength to recover to this extent. Xiao Langjun thought before he lost consciousness. I hope that Shui guy can be more reliable. At least hurt her. Young girl No Return defeated her opponent with a single palm. Her eyes didn't have much emotion. She didn't look at an opponent of this level. Chapter 184. You're awake? How do you feel? You're badly hurt. Please don't move, here? This is the Tianyun school. Xiao Langjun sat in front of the table in a daze, feeling the sudden drop in his strength. For a moment, he found it hard to accept. He knew that even if he and the Shadowless Man teamed up, they would not be able to stop the Buddha. He did not expect his level to drop. The difference between a break world and a transcendent was that they had their own rules. The rules could interfere with reality, and they did not need to use other powers. But now, his exclusive rule had been shattered by No Return. Xiao Langjun, who was always smiling, could not smile this time. He did not know how long it would take to fix his rules, and he did not know how much it would cost. Most importantly, he did not know how to leave this place. Xiao Langjun scratched his head in pain. Even if the Xinghai Pavilion could compensate him for his loss, he would have to contact them first. Without the power of a break world, he could not tear open the space barrier. No, the fairy and demon gathering was about to begin. He still had a chance. He quickly recalled what had caused him to end up in such a situation. Mn, that old bald donkey. I hope Shui will give her a hard time. At least, she cannot come in without a scratch. Xiao Langjun thought to himself. He had never looked forward to his unreliable companion as much as he did now. Although she was a bit honest, she was not weak. After fantasizing for a while, Xiao Langjun finally regained the demeanor of a senior expert. With a serious expression, he said, "Get someone in charge here." Even without his own rules, he was still a top transcendent. He was a master among masters. Tell him that the chance to dominate the continent is right in front of him. Let's see if he will take it. Xiao Langjun's tone was infectious, and the girl serving him nodded in shock. Then, she quickly ran away. A moment later, a woman walked into the room and smiled. Land Marigold is here to see you, mister. The white mist space in the fairy and demon world was actually a small town. It was in front of a canyon in the northwest of the continent. On this day, Gu Nan was burying his head in a pile of documents. More than half of the dossiers in front of him were about the various forbidden lands and relics on this continent. The history of the immortal demon world could be traced back to tens of thousands of years ago. There were so many strange stories that even the locals couldn't tell. However, Gu Nan was looking through them seriously, going forward to check and search one by one to determine if the world supervisor was there. This kind of work was dull and tedious, but Gu Nan enjoyed it. Now that he was at Tier 4, he could ignore the boundaries of space and truly go wherever he wanted. It was no different from teleporting around in a game. What he was doing now was actually like finding a clue in a game and then going to various major maps to check. The players had seen this kind of thing many times, so they didn't take it to heart. Deathly Silence territory. It was first seen 2,500 years ago. Legend has it that it was caused by the gathering of dead souls. Go and find out the exact location. Even if it seemed to have nothing to do with the world supervisor, Gu Nan would still ask the people of the White Mist to investigate it. As long as the location could be determined, it wouldn't take much time for him to search it personally. "Sir, we're running out of manpower," Third Last said with a bitter smile as she stood beside Gu Nan. There were not many people that the White Mist could mobilize into the fairy and demon world, and Gu Nan had given them too many orders during this period of time. There were so many that they couldn't complete them at all. Given Third Last's fear of Gu Nan, the fact that she was forced to complain showed how much the people of the White Mist had been oppressed. Continue to recruit people, then. Get people from planet Xianwang to come over. We can also recruit people locally. But reincarnation. Third Last was a little stunned. The secret of reincarnation had never been made public, but it seemed like Gu Nan was going to recruit a lot of people. As for recruiting local members, they needed people from planet Xianwang to come over. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to control so many people at all. Gu Nan waved his hands nonchalantly. He just wanted to achieve his goal, and he didn't care about the impact it would cause. If it really didn't work out, he wouldn't mind purging the entire fairy and demon world and mobilizing the forces of the world to help him search. There must be regulators. The longer Gu Nan stayed there, the more certain he was about that. The Azure Dragon Hall had mobilized their troops without restraint, mobilizing the strength of half the continent to advance toward the city of no return. This news spread in a short 2 days, immediately causing a stir in the world. The most surprised ones were the higher-ups of a country and a sect in the east. The three major powers of the continent had been restraining each other and had maintained peace for nearly a year. The Azure Dragon Hall had always considered itself to be a coward. The high-end combat power of Blue Dragon Hall was inferior to that of the two forces, and they might not even be comparable to one of them. The reason why they could occupy more territory was because they lacked manpower at the bottom. After all, with the propaganda of Blue Dragon Hall back then, the reincarnators didn't dare to put the natives in important positions. The real key positions had always been controlled by their own people. But this time, Blue Dragon Hall's brazen dispatch of troops really confused both sides. Is that woman with the surname Yen crazy? She doesn't want the huge territory of Blue Dragon Hall anymore? Hey, don't say that. Now that the people of Blue Dragon Hall are all united, it's really not easy to deal with them. I heard that the city of No Return occupied the ancestral land of Blue Dragon Hall more than 20 years ago, the earliest headquarters address. I see. I knew it. Similar conversations were happening all over the mainland. The words and terms used were different, but the general meaning was the same. This was the only reason why Blue Dragon Hall made such a big move. Hearing that the ancestral land of Blue Dragon Hall was the ancestral land, many people even recalled the glory of the past. In the 20 years before the rise of a country and a sect, it was the era of Blue Dragon Hall. That female hall master led countless heroes and treated the entire world as their hunting ground. It was also at that time that the unbeatable Blue Dragon Iron Cavalry became famous throughout the entire mainland. Although Blue Dragon Hall's glory was no longer there, the illustrious years that belonged to this name still remained in people's hearts. The last bit of glory? Gu Nianji's lips curled into a slight smile as she thought of the stubborn girl. If there was anyone in the entire Blue Dragon Hall worthy of her attention, it was probably that hall master herself. Back then, she was bewitched by Gu Nan and really thought that Yan Xiaoxiao was a character that could be easily manipulated. In the end, the latter succeeded in turning the tables at the most critical moment. That kind of law. Gu Nian narrowed his eyes slightly. It's really a bit tricky. Chapter 185. Gather all our masters as fast as you can and go to the city of no return. Land Marigold gave the order quickly. In the face of the abnormal actions of the Green Dragon Hall, the two actual controllers of the Eastern country and sect made similar decisions at the same time. If Yan Xiaoxiao wanted to fight, then so be it. For the two on the eastern side, a decisive battle was definitely not a loss. The reason was simple. Their people were not afraid of death. If they died, a new group of people would come in and arrange for these people to do the work outside. If a person from Blue Dragon Hall died, there would be one less person. How could those who were afraid of death defeat those who were not? Plus, Blue Dragon Hall did not even have the upper hand in terms of strength. As for whether or not the Green Dragon Hall would play tricks and turn around to attack other places, they were not afraid at all. As long as the power in their hands was not damaged, they could take back the territory they had lost in the blink of an eye. It was not difficult to understand the principle of saving people and losing land. You can't go there. A slightly frightened voice was heard. It was Xiao Langjun shouting at Land Marigold. At this time, Xiao Langjun was in a terrible state. He did not deserve the nickname Langjun. All the major joints in his body were pierced by 26 bone nails. His rule power was completely blocked. No matter whether it was his body or his soul, he could not move. This world breaker was like a dead mouse. He was nailed to a wooden frame. He could only shout at Land Marigold helplessly. Why? Lu Zhanyu bent down with a smile and looked at the side of Xiao Langjun's face. Mr. Wang Pomian, Xiao Langjun from the Star Ocean Pavilion? Wang Pomian's pupils shrank slightly, and a drop of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. This woman knew his real name. Obviously, she was not a simple character. He just did not know who was behind her and why she wanted to get involved, but Wang Bomian knew he had no time to hesitate. If he couldn't provide enough valuable information, this dangerous woman would definitely kill him without hesitation. A dead break world was no different from a dead commoner. I don't know if you've heard of the Immortal and Devil Gathering. Wang Bomian tried his best to speak in a calm tone, appearing to be unfathomable. He hoped to show his worth, otherwise, Land Marigold would definitely not spare his life before she left. Immortal and Demon Association? As expected, Land Marigold revealed an interested expression, and her hands slightly stopped moving. That's right. Wang Pomian's voice grew louder. This plane was the battlefield of the ancient war between immortals and demons. It is also the astral realm of a super-astral lord. You're talking about the half-immortal and half-demon, the one who almost succeeded in seizing the astral realm, right? Land Marigold said casually, her voice not carrying any emotion. She picked up a bottle of medicinal powder and gently sprinkled it in front of Wang Bomian. At some point in time, a small formation had already appeared in front of him. A hint of horror gradually appeared in Wang Bomian's eyes, and his entire body seemed to be trembling. Who exactly are you? I am just an insignificant character. Land Marigold revealed a smile. Only a Buddha who turned into a demon would be interested in the Immortal and Demon Association, right? Wang Bomian was completely speechless. He felt as if he had just escaped from a tiger's mouth and entered a wolf's den. At this time, Land Marigold's formation was completely activated. A strange shadow slowly appeared in front of Wang Bomian. It was a strange flower with a large, bloody mouth, and the edge of the mouth had sawtooth barbs. I used to be a world breaker, so I can't waste it. Land Marigold smiled and said, Then I will leave this place to you, Mr. Stostian. After uttering the strange name, Lu Jianyu turned around and walked towards the back. There was a door that was glowing with a faint golden light. Wang Bomian used his last terrified voice to say, Astral Realm Door. You are, the people of the three major forces of the mainland were all rushing to the city of no return in the center of the mainland. So, without any reason, this place became the focus of everyone's attention. Even the people in the white fog, while they were painstakingly collecting and confirming information, would involuntarily pay attention to this place. So, there was a lot of information about the center of the mainland. Needless to say, it was because of this that a rather valuable piece of information was found. 10,000 years of the Earth's core, the opportunity of the immortal and demon, the place where the soul returns. There were only 12 words left, and it seemed incomplete, but the information revealed was enough for Gu Nan to pay attention to. This sentence came from 10,000 years ago, and even the words used were barely translated. It was not clear whether it was right or wrong, and there must be more words behind it, but they had been lost. But just these 12 words had already given the most important information: the location. If the Earth's core referred to the center of the mainland, then the so-called opportunity of the immortal and demon was very likely what he was looking for. The city of no return? Gu Nan had a smile on his face, and his figure suddenly disappeared. At this moment there was a strange atmosphere in the city of no return because the owner of this city, Yi Chen, who claimed to be building a country of the Son of Providence, was doing something improper. Boss Yi, it's here. A young man stood next to Yi Chen and pointed at a ruin in front of him. He was one of the first sons of Providence to follow Yi Chen, and he could also be considered a high-ranking member of the city of no return. This time, he came here because something strange had appeared in this ruin. It's a statue, the young man said to Yi Chen. The young man said to Yi Chen, We don't know what it is, but just one look at it and I feel my heart palpitate. Palpitations? Yi Chen narrowed his eyes slightly. He was once a son of Providence, so he knew very well that those who were blessed by Providence should despise everything and be fearless. What exactly would make them feel palpitations? The two of them walked toward the ruins step by step. The young man suppressed the palpitations in his heart and said, Boss Yi, the army of Blue Dragon Hall will arrive at the city tomorrow. What do you think? It's okay. Yi Chen said without turning his head, as if he did not care about the famous Blue Dragon Hall at all. Indeed, he did not care. As a former top-notch sect master in the world, even if his strength had not fully recovered, he had the confidence to face any enemy. He could wipe out all the high-ranking members of Blue Dragon Hall alone, so what was there to be afraid of? What he really cared about was the thing that the shadowless woman mentioned. She would only show up to see me if I found that thing. Yi Chen glanced at the sky by instinct, his eyes flickering with blurred emotions. In the next moment, he saw the statue that his companion had mentioned. Chapter 186. When the Blue Dragon Hall's main army gathered under the city of no return, the other two sects teams had also arrived. They were even faster than them. It was because the powerhouses of each country and sect were concentrated closer to the front line, so it was much easier for them to rush over. In the Blue Dragon Hall's camp, the group of upper echelons looked solemn and even frowned. Yan Xiaoxiao's sudden willingness to start a war certainly made them excited, but the enemy's strength was undeniable. Hall Master, the powerhouses of the country of Yen and the Heavenly Fates sect are here. Should we? No need. Yan Xiaoxiao interrupted him, and her cold voice rang in everyone's ears. It's just a city of no return. 5 of you, come with me. We'll enter the city directly. Sending an elite team to carry out a blitzkrieg was actually a very uncommon tactic. The reason was simple. The powerhouses must be in a high position. How could they be willing to go deep into the enemy's territory alone and bear all the risks themselves? If they did that, what was the point of having an army under them? However, on the other hand, once someone did that, it could indeed achieve an unexpected effect. By the time the people of each country and sect received the news, the flag on top of the city of no return had changed hands. The city that had just been occupied belonged to Blue Dragon Hall again. What happened? Where's Yi Chen? Gu Nian asked with a frown. The city of no return's fall was too inexplicable. It made her suspect that all of this was Blue Dragon Hall's show and that the so-called Yi Chen was just a cover. Our people in the city didn't get any more information. We only know that Yi Chen went somewhere before this, and he hasn't appeared since. Gu Qing's voice sounded very confused. Even if Yi Chen was delayed by something, he wouldn't ignore his own camp, right? Was he going to give the city of no return to Blue Dragon Hall just like that? Gu Nian frowned. She felt that the whole thing was getting more and more bizarre, as if there was an invisible hand behind the scenes that was manipulating everything. Moreover, it was a rather unscrupulous kind, as if he was not afraid of being seen through by them. Yan Xiaoxiao inexplicably chose a decisive battle, and after the three parties gathered, the city of no return fell into the hands of Blue Dragon Hall. However, as mentioned before, even if he knew that there was something fishy going on, Gu Nian could only choose to advance. It was precisely because there was something fishy going on that they had to advance. Otherwise, someone might be able to deceive everyone. On the other hand, if the other party had someone far more powerful than them, then there was no need for them to do such a thing. Gu Nianji was very clear about what was going on. However, in case it was a trap, she could not put all her power into it. Gu Qing, Gu Xing, come with me. Gu Nian chose to bring two of his family's transcendent juniors, and they also set off as an elite team. Yes. In the ruins of the city of no return, Yan Xiaoxiao was standing alone, looking at the two people in front of her coldly. Yi Chen and his companion, Wu Yunjue, who was the young man who brought him here, also looked at Yan Xiaoxiao coldly, but their feelings were completely different. Why, you're the hall master of Blue Dragon Hall. Wu Yunjue had seen Yan Xiaoxiao's portrait before, so he exclaimed immediately. The city of no return has changed hands. Are you guys not going to surrender? Yan Xiaoxiao said calmly, but what she said shocked Wu Yunjue. Impossible. He almost blurted out, but after he said it, his rationality told him that it was true. If the city of no return had not been breached, why would Yan Xiaoxiao appear here? His eyes began to redden. His blood, sweat, his dreams, his brothers. Were they destroyed by Blue Dragon Hall just like that? Go to hell. As Wu Yunjue roared, he wanted to punch Yan Xiaoxiao. However, as soon as he took a step, there seemed to be an invisible wall in front of him, blocking his way. Crack! His fist hit the invisible wall, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. However, the pain in his hand could not alleviate the anger in Wu Yunjue's heart. Yi Chen still maintained his cold expression. He did not even appear when the city of no return was breached because of the invisible barrier around this statue that trapped them here. You knew about the existence of this statue? Yi Chen questioned Yan Xiaoxiao coldly. As a young hero who started his career as a son of Providence, he had always looked down on such despicable people who played tricks. However, Yan Xiaoxiao shook her head lightly. She did not even look at him. Instead, she was staring at the statue. Someone summoned me here. I don't know who it is, and I don't know why. She seemed to be explaining, but it also seemed like she was saying it to herself. I know now. She walked toward the statue slowly. As she moved, the invisible wall seemed to have disappeared. She only spoke slowly when she arrived before the statue. Who are you? Then, as Yi Chen and Shui Yan watched in a strange manner, tiny light spots appeared out of thin air and slowly formed a human figure. Yi Chen's pupils shrunk slightly because he was too familiar with that person. It was the woman without a shadow. Shui Yan still had a blank expression on her face. There was a palm print on her chest, and there was a strange aura that was neither Buddha nor demon mixed on it. However, there was a little passion in her eyes. "Come and become one with me, my sister." Below the city of no return, Gu Nian brought the other two people from care for one's family to the city gate. However, she suddenly stopped walking. "Sister?" Gu Xing looked at her in confusion. Gu Xing was also one of the new transcendents from care for one's family. She had elevated earlier than Gu Qing. Gu Nian did not reply. Instead, she looked not far away. On the other side of the city gate, a silhouette was slowly appearing. Land Marigold walked slowly to the three of them with a strange smile on her face. "Ms. Gu, we meet again. So, you're the person behind the Tianyun sect." Gu Nian squinted and took a good look at her. She was very familiar with Land Marigold's sister, Lu Xinyu, but she was not familiar with her younger sister. However, she had found some clues when she was at the red carpet back then. Never had she thought that she would see her here. Not only that, but she made the same choice as her, even though she was alone. "It doesn't matter who it is." Land Marigold pointed at the white light that suddenly lit up in the city of no return. "What's important is that the immortal and fiend gathering has begun." Gu Nian took a good look at her, and said to the other two people behind her in a deep voice, "Let's go." In the next second, the three of them disappeared at the same time and headed into the city of no return at high speed. Meanwhile, Land Marigold revealed a faint smile on her face and followed the three of them. However, what they did not notice was that after they left, another person walked out of the void. Chapter 187. Evil Event Triggered. Fairy Demon Party. The completely unreasonable Evil God's Palace sent Gu Nan this message again. He appeared in No Return City and watched Land Marigold and Gu Nian disappear. This was obviously another crime that was close at hand, just like the innumerable Buddha true girl last time. Gu Nan didn't need to guess blindly, but the difficulty was definitely not small. In the middle and late stages of the game, this was indeed the case. Especially after the appearance of private dungeons, the proportion of the player's evil points would decrease, and the evil events would increase. At the same time, the difficulty of triggering evil events would increase. Players would need to explore on their own. Usually, the event would only be triggered when it was right in front of them. Just like the chain of events that Gu Nan had encountered, the situation where he was slowly led to find the god's personality would never happen again. If it wasn't for the god's personality being so precious, he wouldn't have encountered the chain of events. But now, if an event is triggered, it means there is something good nearby. Gu Nan had a deep understanding of the rules of events. If he had been able to make the myriad Buddha True Maiden stay behind during the incident with the myriad Buddha True Maiden, perhaps he would have gained even more. In the ruins, when Land Marigold and Gu Nian arrived, they saw a very strange scene. Yen Xiaoxiao was looking at an expressionless woman. Between the two of them, there was an invisible chain that bound Yen Xiaoxiao's body. She couldn't move. World Breaker. Gu Nian's face didn't look good. She had too little information, so little that she couldn't calculate or deduce. A world breaker had appeared just like that. How many big shots were hiding behind this? She almost wanted to turn around and leave. There were some things that she couldn't covet. Fortunately, this was just a reincarnation plane, so she felt a little bit lucky. "Become one with me." Shui Yan's voice was still echoing slowly. At this moment, a palm print fell from the sky. The figure of the young girl No Return appeared in midair. She stretched out her hand and slapped down. A white light suddenly appeared above Shui Yan's head, and it actually forcibly blocked No Gui's palm. Whether it was the devil intent or the Buddha's heart, everything was annihilated in this endless light. Immortal and devil association, so you're that immortal? The young girl Wu Guo said coldly. At the side, Land Marigold revealed a look of sudden realization. Someone had predicted this day and took away one of the members of the Immortal and Demon Association ahead of time. How generous! What exactly is the Immortal and Devil Association? Gu Nian asked with a frown. After all, there was no danger to his life, so she was content to be a spectator. In this world, immortals can be born one day, and devils can be born one day. Land Marigold answered, someone prophesied that when the immortals and demons meet, it would be the day that person's orthodoxy would appear. What she didn't say was that such an arrangement had long been seen through by others, who knew how many years in advance they had directly taken the heavenly immortal away from this world. However, for some reason, the heavenly immortal had returned. You guys can't stop me. The young girl, Wu Guo, was still sitting on the black lotus. With a solemn expression, she slowly reached out a hand. Golden and purple flames began to burn on her hand. Her palm pressed down lightly, and a huge palm appeared out of thin air, pressing down on Shui Yan's head. However, Shui Yan still didn't move, but the light above her head became more dazzling. While the endless light was dissipating, it was also crazily eroding the demonic intent of Wu Guo. The two seemed to be in a tug-of-war, and it was a matter of who would give up first. Meanwhile, Shui Yan still had to deal with Yan Xiaoxiao's restraint, and the latter's body was flashing with a faint black light. However, at this moment, a fist suddenly hit Shui Yan's lower abdomen, where the palm print that contained the Buddhist and demonic intent was still lingering. It was Yi Chen, the son of Providence that Shui Yan had brought here, finally made the choice that suited him best at this most critical moment. Whoever went against the young girl, Wu Guo, would be his enemy. In his arms, a pitch-black lotus was shining brightly. It was the black lotus that the young girl, Wu Guo, had given him back then, and he was using it at this moment. Only by using the power of this black lotus could he possibly affect Shui Yan, who was a world breaker. After the punch landed, the white light around Shui Yan suddenly shrank, and her entire body was blasted away. However, her expression was still numb, and even her gaze did not waver. Yi Chen seemed a little confused, but the young girl, Wu Guo, reacted much faster than him. Almost at the same time that Shui Yan flew backward, she had already appeared in front of the statue and reached out to press her hand on the statue's head. No. She brought me here. Yi Chen suddenly calmed down, as if he had understood something. He immediately shouted, but it was too late. Just before the young girl, Wu Guo, touched the statue, another shadow appeared in front of her. It was a huge man-eating flower, but its upper body was in the shape of a flower, but its lower body was in the shape of an upside-down human face. It looked very strange. Buddha, let the great Stadthain send you to continue reincarnating. As a horrifying voice came from the mouth of the human face, the man-eating flower's huge mouth instantly bit down. Astral Gate. The young girl, Wu Guo, snorted angrily and swung her palm again. She went forward without hesitation, planning to use her body to fight the man-eating flower. However, boundless light appeared behind her again. Shui Yan seemed to be completely uninjured. She held a ball of light in one hand and smashed it down expressionlessly. She had schemed and plotted today's situation in order to destroy the Buddha in one fell swoop. The young girl, Wu Guo, finally had some anger in her eyes. She began to realize that from the moment she woke up, she had fallen into the trap of who knew how many people. Stadthain wanted the orthodoxy, the Shadowless wanted this world, and she was the only one who wanted both. Therefore, they cooperated with each other to put her in a dead end. The cooperation between the two world breakers did not have any form of communication from beginning to end, but they had created such a flawless trap. Is it going to end here? This young girl, who had turned from a Buddha to a demon, was in a life-and-death situation like this. Her mind became more and more clear. She put her palms together in front of her, half gold and half purple, half Buddha and half demon. However, at this moment, a fist appeared without any warning. It seemed to break through the void, and at the same time, it avoided the three world breakers who were fighting and went straight for the statue. The man-eating flower realized this person's plan, and the face suddenly shouted in panic, "No! No!" Bang! There was a muffled sound, and then there was the sound of something breaking. Then, under everyone's gaze, the statue began to crack bit by bit. No! The upside-down face's eyes widened as if it could not believe what was happening in front of it. The orthodoxy was broken. A figure slowly appeared next to the statue. This person was dressed in white, and he looked at the broken statue and smiled with satisfaction. Goodbye, Supervisor. Chapter 188. From the moment he saw the statue, Gu Nan realized that he was the culprit behind all of this. Others might not recognize that strange statue, but he was very clear about it. It was Zhuo Zhuo, who he had met in the private dungeon and then inexplicably appeared in front of him. Gu Nan was very confused about Zhuo Zhuo's purpose in appearing. He once thought that the astral realm had attracted her, but he felt that it didn't make sense. The astral realm was in existence on the level of the 72 boundaries, and its location had long been known by all the major planes. Why would she need Gu Nan to lead the way? It wasn't until he saw the statue that Gu Nan realized that what Zhuo Zhuo found on him was not the coordinates of the astral realm, but the coordinates of the immortal demon world. The immortal demon world was probably Zhuo Zhuo's god kingdom, or rather, the astral realm. After she had no choice but to leave, she still left her statue behind to act as the supervisor of the god kingdom. Only the immortal demon world, which could jump between planes, could escape from Zhuo Zhuo's control. It wasn't until the appearance of Gu Nan that he rediscovered the aura of this place. Putting away all the thoughts in his mind, Gu Nan's fist was still in the same place, but the statue had disappeared, leaving only fragments on the ground. Shui Yin and the other two next to him all paused. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Wu Gui finally found a chance to escape. Her figure flashed, and she had already escaped from the siege of Shui Yin and the man-eating flower. Shui Yin slowly put away the ball of light in her hand and looked at Gu Nan with a slightly complicated expression. As for Lord Stoyan, who was above the flower and below the man, he was in a completely frenzied state. He had racked his brains for the orthodoxy left behind by that person, and now, the statue that represented the orthodoxy was smashed by Gu Nan just like that. The inverted human face on the lower half of Stoyan's body stared at Gu Nan with red eyes, and his voice was like that of a demon that had crawled out of the abyss. "You. Find. Die." The terrifying man-eating flower floated in the air, and then, as if it had teleported, it suddenly appeared above Gu Nan's head and bit down on him. However, Gu Nan only raised his head coldly, then stretched out his right hand and directly grabbed the man-eating flower's jagged fangs. Even the young girl, No Return, had to use her demonic intent to resist the man-eating flower, but Gu Nan directly grabbed it with his bare hands. Stoyan's human face smiled coldly. If one thought that its fangs were only sharp, then they would be gravely mistaken. The law of ripping attached to the sawtooth that it was so proud of did not seem to have any effect at all. It dissipated into nothingness after being casually grasped by the opponent. In the next moment it felt a weightlessness in its entire body. It was Gu Nan who had grabbed its fangs and lifted it upside down. This scene was very visually impactful. Gu Nan grabbed the fangs with one hand and lifted a man-eating flower that was dozens of times larger than him over his head. Then, he smashed it hard on the ground. Boom! Stoyan's huge body crashed down and directly smashed a large pit in the ground. The smoke and dust that soared into the sky blocked everyone's vision. After a while, Gu Nan's figure appeared in their line of sight again, and Stoyan was lying on the ground, motionless. Relying on the suddenness of the break power and the terrifying power of the body of the evil god, Gu Nan had already been defeated by this Lord Man-Eating Flower in just a moment. As expected, there is still a big shot, but I did not expect. Land Marigold had a bitter smile on her face as she stared at Gu Nan in midair. It will be him. Gu Nian used an inexplicable tone to continue Land Marigold's words. If one had to say who had the most complicated feelings at that moment, it had to be Lady Gu Nian. After all, she had personally brought Gu Nan out of a small plane, but he had rocketed to the level of a break world in a very short period of time. Gu Nian, who would never admit defeat, felt a sense of defeat that was difficult to erase for the first time. Even when Gu Nan easily surpassed her, she thought she could catch up. After all, the mysteriousness of her rule was the greatest help in leveling up to the break world. But now that distant goal was actually easily achieved by someone. You also want this world, don't you? Shui Yan's calm voice sounded next to Gu Nan's ear. Just breaking the statue is far from enough. She had no need for the orthodoxy. She just wanted to merge with her little sister, so she could still remain calm. The rule here is to merge. If you want to control it, you must first understand it, another voice sounded. It was very smooth, as if the same person was speaking. Gu Nan turned around. He did not know when Yan Xiaoxiao had arrived next to him. At this moment, her face was full of indifference, and even her eyes were emitting a faint black light. However, it was immediately restrained, and she revealed a familiar smile. I want to try, teacher. Yan Xiaoxiao, who had become familiar to Gu Nan, said something he did not understand. Gu Nan understood what she meant. He nodded. The next moment, it was like something landed on Yan Xiaoxiao's body. It made her presence explode. It was almost the same as Shui Yan's. At the same time, Yan Xiaoxiao waved her hand. It was like the darkness of hell had appeared. It appeared next to Gu Nan's body and crazily went into his body. With some special rule, Yan Xiaoxiao temporarily leveled up to the break world level. Light and dark. Assimilation and infiltration. The two sides of the merging rule? Gu Nan was very familiar with the rules of the world. He could almost see through her. In Zuo's was Fairy Demon World, the core rule was merging. Shui Yan and Yan Xiaoxiao had inherited the two sides of merging. The light assimilation power and the dark infiltration power. It was no wonder that when Yan Xiaoxiao leveled up to become super, Gu Nan thought her rule was weird. It was not like an ordinary wind rule. It was infiltration. Infiltration was all-pervasive. The endless darkness was like a crazily crawling bug. It quickly went into Gu Nan's ears, nose, and eyes. It was like it was going to fill his entire body. Unfortunately, before the darkness could approach him, Gu Nan's heart had already lit up slightly. The magic-breaking attribute was instantly activated, and the boundless darkness was instantly cleared away. From the outside, it looked like Gu Nan had a shield around him that blocked out the darkness. Break spell power. Yan Xiaoxiao and Shui Yan spoke at the same time. Their voices were synchronized. Even their different voices were starting to match. At this time, the sky and ground were shaking more and more violently. No one was controlling the core rules. The world looked like it was going to collapse. For Gu Nan, this was a good thing. It meant he could take over this place. Don't waste time. Gu Nan waved his hand to dispel the darkness around him. His face started to smile. Chapter 189. In fact, Gu Nan had a lot of experience in controlling a world. In game terms, it was actually privatizing a dungeon and turning an external dungeon into a player's private dungeon. Gu Nan had long been familiar with this process. Find the core principle of the dungeon, and then kill the boss in the dungeon who had the ability to control this principle. This boss was usually the controller of the dungeon. Of course, it was different in the immortal and demon world. Zuo had obviously given up on this place and rebuilt the astral plane. After the statue was broken, only the twins, Yan Xiaoxiao and Shui Yan, could compete with him. As soon as Gu Nan finished speaking, he had already leaped up. His fist, which contained the power of breaking the spell, was thrown toward Yan Xiaoxiao, who was the closest to him, without hesitation. It's useless. As Yan Xiaoxiao's voice sounded, a faint light flashed where the statue was broken, and Gu Nan was inexplicably isolated. Gu Nan was very familiar with this power. It was the repulsive force from the immortal and demon world, but this time, he was isolated. If you want to control fusion, you must first complete the fusion. The two of us are one, but who are you willing to fuse with? Shui Yan and Yan Xiaoxiao said the same thing. The two of them held hands as if they were one person. In front of Gu Nan, a figure began to slowly appear. It was an unknown transcendent cultivator. He didn't even know why he was here and looked around in astonishment. An inexplicable message entered Gu Nan's mind. Only if he chose to fuse with this person in front of him would he be qualified to try to control the law of fusion. Gu Nan's expression didn't look too good. He knew that he had actually been tricked by Zhuozhuo. In order to make her plan a reality, Zhuozhuo set up such strange conditions. It was completely tailored for Yan Xiaoxiao and Shui Yan. Apart from the two of them, who would be willing to fuse with someone else? This was like how some units in Gu Nan's previous life recruited civil servants. They directly stated that the person's surname was X, they had to graduate from a certain university, and they had to be 1.75 meters tall. By doing this, don't you feel like you've made a decision? Gu Nan rolled his eyes and said something that the two of them could not understand. Then, without hesitation, he punched the person in front of him. However, the fusion of the laws was even faster. Without any delay, the divine soul of another transcendent was captured and appeared in front of Gu Nan. It was Gu Nian's younger brother, Gu Qing. When he was in the care for one's family, he had seen Gu Nan before. At this time, he immediately blurted out, "Young Master Nan Bang." Gu Nan didn't have the slightest bit of scruples about their past relationship. Gu Qing's head was also blasted apart, and his soul was instantly dispersed. The next target of fusion appeared. The third, the fourth. Gu Nan killed them one by one. What you're doing is meaningless. This time, it was the two girls' turn to frown. They couldn't understand Gu Nan's actions. Was he waiting for a suitable target to appear? However, in reality, no one was particularly suitable for Gu Nan. It was the same no matter who he chose. However, on the other side, among the people watching all this, a voice slowly sounded. He might want to kill everyone. Land Marigold looked at Gu Nan with a pale face. It was her who had spoken. She had once worked together with Gu Nan on a mission, so she understood Gu Nan's train of thought better than anyone else. As long as he killed everyone, there would be no target for fusion. He was indeed capable of doing such a thing. While she was speaking, Gu Nan's killing efficiency became higher and higher. He still needed to punch the transcendent, but for those who weren't at the transcendent level, he only needed a thought, and the laws would be able to directly crush them. Kill all the living beings in the world? Even the young girl, No Return, raised her eyebrows slightly. Even she had never considered such a crazy thing. Gu Nan was killing without saying a word. That was indeed what he was thinking. There was an obvious flaw in the conditions for fusion of laws. As long as there were no two fusion targets in the world, the laws naturally couldn't be achieved. Under such circumstances, the laws would enter a self-sealing state and then be manipulated by the players. This wasn't the first time that the players had found a loophole in the system. Moreover, the number of people Gu Nan actually had to kill was much fewer than expected. Those who hadn't cultivated to a certain level and didn't have a strong enough soul could not be collected. During the collection process, they would be directly annihilated. In other words, there wasn't much time left for Shui Yan and the other girl. As if realizing this, the two girls' fusion speed suddenly sped up. The next person to move was not young girl No Return, but Stoston, who was lying on the ground. This Lord Man-Eating Flower had been pretending to be dead for a long time. At this moment, it suddenly jumped up and tore open the void, while Gu Nan didn't have time to deal with it. Young girl No Return shook her head lightly. She also waved her hand and tore open the void, taking Yi Chen with her. Since the orthodoxy was destroyed, just obtaining the world was meaningless to her. Therefore, she left very casually, taking advantage of the fact that Gu Nan wasn't interested in killing her. Thus, only Gu Nian and Land Marigold were left at the scene. They looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They didn't have the ability to tear open the void, so naturally, they couldn't escape. They could only wait to be drawn by Gu Nan and become souls under his fists. The two girls knew Gu Nan very well and didn't think that he was someone who would remember old friendships. As for the matter of reincarnation, it was no longer important. Even this world was collapsing. How could they retrieve the half of the soul that existed in the origin of the world? Even the method to end the reincarnation was ineffective. It seemed that the only thing left for the two of them was to wait for death. "There's another way," Gu Nian said in a low voice. Land Marigold was startled. She turned to look at Gu Nian, only to see that she was looking at Shui Yen and Yi Chen, as well as the light above the statue fragment. She understood what the other party meant. In this life and death situation, it was Gu Nian who was more decisive. There's no way to escape. This is indeed the only way to survive. Land Marigold smiled self-mockingly and looked at Gu Nian again. There was only determination in Gu Nian's eyes. She stretched out her right hand and placed it in front of Land Marigold. The latter put her hand on it without hesitation. Just like Shui Yen and Yen Xiaoxiao, the two of them slowly walked to the statue fragment. Then, an inexplicable power began to emerge from their bodies. Shui Yen and Yen Xiaoxiao opened their eyes in surprise. An inexplicable connection had appeared between the two of them, and it was rapidly strengthening. An unexpected pair of competitors. If they wanted to fight for a chance of survival against Gu Nan, they had to personally participate in this fusion competition. As long as they started the fusion, they could at least ensure the safety of their godly souls. They wouldn't be directly sacrificed to Gu Nan. Next, it would depend on whether Gu Nan would kill all the living beings in this world first, or if they would control the origin of this world first. But right at this moment, a scene that no one had expected happened. When Gu Nan destroyed another fusion target, the grabbing of the fusion law seemed to pause for a moment. Then, a phantom image slowly appeared. And this godly soul that appeared was in the shape of a huge man-eating flower. This was Stoston, who had just escaped. Why? Stoston's inverted face let out a sound of disbelief. It couldn't understand why the laws of this world could affect it, who had already broken through space and left. However, its confusion didn't affect Gu Nan's actions at all. Chapter 190. The fairy demon world was like a cage that could not be broken out of. Even if Statine broke space, he was still pulled back by some power. His identity as a world breaker did not save him. It only gave him some special privileges. He returned with his real body, not in the form of a god soul. He did not have time to think. Gu Nan's fist was already coming. To make the most of his break spell power, he gave up on the shadow sword. He did not even use the infinite critical strikes displacement rule. At this stage, the power of break was undoubtedly his most powerful technique. Only some special powers could restrain it. Gu Nan was not like some people. He hid all kinds of trump cards. He liked to use his full power to kill people. That habit was built on the basis that Gu Nan had many different skills. Either he killed the enemy in one hit, or he exposed as many weaknesses as he could. Then, he attacked his weaknesses. That was Gu Nan's logic. Pang! The fist hit Stadian's body without any resistance. The latter's rules and defenses were a joke. Fortunately, the giant man-eating flower had a special body. It did not die from one punch. It only screamed in pain. The tentacles on its body started to dance, creating ripples around it. The face coughed up blood and spoke with difficulty. "Mister, we do not need to fight to the death, Pang." The reply was another punch. Gu Nan never thought about working with Statine. He only trusted his own judgment. He knew how to control a world better than anyone else. Unless you had the power to suppress a world, you could only follow the rules. You could find a loophole in the rules, but you could not go against them. Another punch came, and Stadian's body was sent flying. If the two of them had not been isolated in this space, Gu Nan could have used the man-eating flower to kill Gu Nian and the man. A fight between world breakers, even if it was just the shock waves, was not something they could withstand. Although Gu Nan was in a frenzy of slaughter, his mind was still clear and he could calmly analyze the situation in front of him. Gu Nian and Land Marigold had actually decided to fuse with each other. This was indeed out of his expectations. Moreover, judging from the progress, these two women were sufficiently rational. When faced with the choice of life and death, they displayed unimaginable decisiveness. At first, they were about 100 steps away from the ball of light. In the blink of an eye, they had covered half of the distance. On the other side, Yan Xiaoxiao and Shui Yan were only 15 steps away from each other at the beginning, but now they were still 1 step away from each other. After being beaten by Gu Nan to the point where his qi and blood were in turmoil, Stastian finally understood that he could not just sit and wait for death. It stood up furiously and whipped its tentacles at Gu Nan. Bastard! The great Lord Stoyan wants to. Gu Nan did not seem to feel the powerful tentacles of the man-eating flower. He just let them hit him. The next moment, he reached out and grabbed 2 of the tentacles. He pulled them back. The tentacles were pulled out by him, and they came with a few pieces of the man-eating flower's flesh. This Lord Stastian had the upper body of a man-eating flower that was a plant. Its big mouth was made of fiber, but its lower body was that of an animal. The tentacles were clearly part of that. The tentacles were torn off by Gu Nan, revealing the flesh that was still wriggling inside. It revealed its true identity. It was a guy that was a fusion of 2 creatures. That was why it had come there. It was a fusion rule. Only it and the half-Buddha half-demon No Return would be interested in it. How could a normal person be willing to fuse with someone else? Gu Nan's body flashed. He reappeared in the sky above Stastian. He waved his right hand. A giant shadow sword appeared and stabbed into Stastian's flesh. This time, Stastian did not even have a chance to scream in pain. Gu Nan finally used his displacement rule. The shadow rule, which was dozens of times stronger, destroyed the man-eating flower's body from the inside. The creature exploded into countless pieces of flesh. A world breaker had died at the hands of Gu Nan. Even when it died, it did not make much noise. You could not blame it. Facing a bug like Gu Nan, even the great Lord Stastian could not imagine what he could do. When Luo Fei had the break power, she had dared to challenge Gu Nan. That showed how strong that power was. Gu Nan's compatibility with the break element was much higher than Luo Fei's. The reason was simple. It was because he had an evil god body. Using the break power could break all rules. He could force his opponent to be in the same state as him. He could only use the power of his body. When it came to this, Gu Nan was not afraid of anyone. After taking care of Stastian, new opponents appeared in front of Gu Nan. Young Lady No Return and Yi Chen did not appear again. Why was Stastian pulled back, but they weren't? Gu Nan continued to kill, but he still had time to think about this question. It was not because of one's plane, and it was not because of the nature of the power. Was it because of the astral body? The experiment that had been repeated for 3 months appeared in Gu Nan's mind again. It made him feel like he was suddenly enlightened. Everyone who entered the fairy demon world had half of their astral body replaced. It must be the same for the natives. When they were born, half of their astral bodies were taken away. Because of this, it could take their astral bodies and make them its enemies. Young Lady No Return had torn open space to come in. Yi Chen must have kept his original astral body. Only Stastian did not. He had used Land Marigold's astral door to enter from the Heaven Star path, keeping half of the souls of all the residents so that we can control them. This is perfect. Gu Nan's desire for the immortal demon world grew stronger. The living conditions of the citizens of the God Kingdom were a joke to the players. They only wanted the God Kingdom to provide them with power. perfect control of the citizens' astral bodies and take their power at will. If there was such a powerful setting, it would definitely be the God Kingdom that the players dreamed of. At the thought of this, Gu Nan sped up again at his maximum speed. According to his calculations, his massacre was coming to an end. The population of the fairy demon world was not small, but how many powerful cultivators were there? Those who were qualified to have their astral bodies extracted were at least at the innate core level. Even if the three forces added up, there would not be more than 100,000 people. With the speed at which Gu Nan killed so many people, it would not take long. However, although Gu Nan killed fast, there was someone faster. On the other side, Gu Nian and Land Marigold held hands and walked to Shui Yan and Yi Chen. Chapter 191. Shui Yan and Yan Xiaoxiao spoke at the same time. They were obviously in disbelief at the sudden appearance of this pair of competitors. The essence of fusion is the connection of the soul and the mind. Land Marigold continued to take a step forward and said softly, "You were born as one and your wills affect each other, but you retain your final self. How can you completely fuse?" Gu Nian took over her words and also took a step forward. The two of them put their hands together and gently placed them on the ball of light. The last step that Shui Yan and Yan Xiaoxiao couldn't take seemed to be nothing to them. Why? Shui Yan turned her head numbly. She knew very well that she didn't have any distracting thoughts, so the problem must be with Yan Xiaoxiao. Yan Xiaoxiao didn't speak, but her originally numb face began to show an expression that seemed to be crying and smiling at the same time. "Teacher," as she said these two words, the connection between her and Shui Yan suddenly shattered, and the black light on her body completely disappeared, leaving only the ordinary-looking girl. She should have erased all emotions, and the final self left in her heart was the part that belonged to Gu Nan. The teacher who took her on the path of slaughter, and seemed to be forever unreachable, had been deeply imprinted in her personality. In the next moment, Gu Nan began to stop moving because as the ball of light was touched, there were no more opponents in front of him. "In the end, we still won." Land Marigold began to smile. She, who had controlled the origin of the world, could clearly feel the expansion of her power. This feeling of having the whole world under her control was really wonderful. But only she knew how much they had paid for this. From this moment on, her life would be connected to another person. Bang! Land Marigold's smile was still on her face, but her head had already exploded. Gu Nan's figure appeared next to her, and blood splattered on the defenseless Gu Nian's face. "Who said that I won't be killed if I control the origin?" Gu Nan shook his hand and muttered to himself in confusion. Even the statue left behind by Zhua could be smashed. So what was the point of controlling the origin? Gu Nian watched all of this in a daze. Land Marigold's divine soul was directly destroyed. The connection that came from the deepest part of her divine soul also caused her to suffer heavy injuries. Her face quickly aged and even withered. Her body also gradually dried up and dissipated into the wind. "However, the two of you have indeed helped me greatly." Gu Nan revealed a smile, and the law of shadows instantly invaded his origin source. This time, he wasn't trying to control her, so he didn't attract the rejection of the world. However, he did something he was extremely familiar with. Just like what he had done in the past 3 months, he engraved a mysterious pattern with the power of shadow. It was the pattern used by the immortal and demon world to capture souls. The origin of the world used this to replace the souls of living beings, and now, Gu Nan was using the same method to take the souls out of its hands. In just the blink of an eye, the origin of the world was directly emptied, and the surviving reincarnators in the immortal and demon world immediately returned, while the natives were completely unaware of this. Gu Nan finally revealed a satisfied expression. His 3 months of hard work hadn't been in vain after all, and it came in handy at this time. Then, the vague power was activated again, and this time, the origin no longer had the power to resist. It could no longer force Gu Nan to provide target. Just like the rules of the game, it began to enter a self-sealing state, waiting for Gu Nan to control it bit by bit. However, unlike Land Marigold, who could control it freely, not only did Gu Nan not feel like he could control it freely, but he also had to let it take up most of its laws. Right now, most of your power has already been sealed. Shui Yan's dull voice was like a gust of cold wind blowing past. It was calm, but there was a hint of mysteriousness in it, and it even made people feel cold all over. Yan Xiaoxiao, who still received a trace of feedback from her, instantly changed her expression. "Teacher, hurry up and leave." However, her power actually came from Shui Yan. Now that the connection between their powers was broken, she couldn't do anything at all. In the next moment, endless light appeared again, and Shui Yan had come to Gu Nan's side. "Come and merge with me. Master of the power of shadow, our powers are originally from the same source." Bang! Gu Nan's fist smashed into her face, but surprisingly, he didn't send her flying. He only broke the bridge of her nose, and blood instantly flowed from Shui Yan's face. Very sturdy. As expected of the law of light. Gu Nan shook his hand and casually complained. Light and shadow were indeed two sides of the same coin, and Shui Yan in front of him was obviously walking a different path from him. She wanted to turn her entire body into light. If she became a Star Lord in the future, she might really be able to achieve the level of "light is me, and I am light." A sharp scream came from Shui Yan's mouth, and countless rays of light radiated from her body, instantly enveloping Gu Nan. "Teacher!" Yan Xiaoxiao stood aside in a daze. Her connection with Shui Yan had been completely cut off, so she didn't know what was happening inside. But she could guess. The assimilation power of light was the same as her infiltration power. They were both part of the law of fusion. Now, her teacher had fallen directly into Shui Yan's light without being able to fight back, but before she could despair, the endless rays of light receded, revealing Gu Nan's intact body. "What the hell is your body made of?" Shui Yan's voice was filled with anger and endless weakness. She couldn't imagine that her invincible law of light couldn't even corrode the enemy's skin when the enemy clearly didn't resist. On the contrary, because she used too much of the light, she entered a weakened state. Gu Nan, who was still controlling the law of shadow and continuously infiltrating the source, curled his lips. With the 80% damage reduction of blunting, even the magic-breaking attribute couldn't hurt him, let alone this level of erosion. He originally wanted to deal with Shui Yan after he completely controlled the source, but since she came to him, he had no reason not to accept her. The heart in the evil god's body beat slightly, and his right hand with the magic-breaking power pierced directly into Shui Yan's chest, instantly ending her life. An hour later, in the depths of the endless starry sky, a red-haired girl slowly opened her eyes. "Shui Yan is dead." She looked a little puzzled, frowning as she muttered to herself. "He didn't intervene in that world, or I would definitely know. Who killed Shui Yan?" Behind her, countless armored servants knelt on one knee, but they didn't make a sound. "Your Majesty, should we?" The girl shook her head lightly. "Let Shanghai Pavilion do it. The star world has been peaceful for too many years." In the all-heaven star path, on the periphery of the immortal demon world, Zhuo Zhuo was looking inside with a chuckle. The evil girl had a strange smile on the left side of her face. "So it's this kind of law. You can do me a big favor." He reached out and grabbed a wisp of divine soul in his hand. Then, his figure instantly disappeared. Chapter 192. Completed event. Immortal and Demon Gathering. Total sin points, 150. As the dust settled, the evil god's temple sent a timely message that Gu Nan's Q coins, no, sin points had been received. This was the first sin event that Gu Nan had done since he reached grade 4, and the reward was much more generous than before. However, it was not beyond Gu Nan's imagination. As the players' levels increased, the reward of the event would increase. Of course, the reason wasn't that it was convenient for the players to level up, but that the higher the level, the more difficult it was to trigger a sin event, so the corresponding reward would increase. After receiving this reward, Gu Nan's sin points had crossed the 1,000 mark, and with Lan Si's efforts during this period, it had reached 1,044 points. His current points were 2,400, and he had basically squeezed out all the points in the Splendid World instance. Barely enough to build the second rule. Gu Nan calculated silently in his heart. However, now was not the time. He had to make arrangements for the immortal and demon world first. He looked at Yan Xiaoxiao, who was intact next to him, and looked a little puzzled. I thought you would disappear as soon as Shui Yan died. Gu Nan didn't have a thorough understanding of the immortal and demon world left by Zhuozhuo, and he needed to study the extremely rare rule of fusion. Just like when Land Marigold's divine soul was destroyed by him, Gu Nian would also be instantly eroded. The two sides of the divine soul fusion were inseparable. Shui Yan was completely dead, but Yan Xiaoxiao was still alive, which was really strange. From the moment she was taken away, only one of us could survive, Yan Xiaoxiao said in a calm tone, but there was a hint of helplessness in her voice. If it weren't for Gu Nan, she and Shui Yan might have suddenly drawn their swords at each other at the last moment before the fusion. Yan Xiaoxiao read all of Shui Yan's memories. There were some things that Shui Yan, who rarely traveled in the world, couldn't understand, but Yan Xiaoxiao knew very well. The one in the deepest part of the starry sky in her mind, she could not help but think of the figure in red with a cold expression. So teacher wants to kill me? Yan Xiaoxiao retracted her gaze and smiled at Gu Nan. Gu Nan shook his head. Now, the existence of anyone in the immortal and devil world was meaningless to him. He also didn't care about the life and death of Yan Xiaoxiao. Gu Nan looked down at the world origin in his hand. It was slowly being eroded by the power of shadow. Since Gu Nan had emptied the imprisoned souls in the origin source, it was unable to provide a target for fusion. Thus, it automatically entered a closed state and could only allow Gu Nan to invade it. It's just a little slow, Gu Nan muttered to himself. At this rate of invasion, it would take at least a few years before he could truly control this source. Fortunately, he was doing this in the immortal and devil world, and the time flow here was 10 times faster than in the astral world. In the end, his level was still not high enough. After all, the privatization of a subplane was something only level 5 players could do. It was too early for Gu Nan to do it now. If Gu Nan was already level 5, it would take much less time. However, before he could truly control the immortal and devil world, he had to take care of this place. In the evil god game, there were many ways to play in the godly kingdom. Except for the battle system provided by the game, the players could do whatever they wanted. Those who liked scenery could build miraculous buildings, develop new races, and play as beautiful as they wanted. Those who liked management could develop their own civilization and guide the people of the godly kingdom in the direction that the players wanted. Racial concepts, aesthetics, values. Everything could be shaped by the players. Those who liked combat were more simple and direct. The only purpose of these players was to make the average combat power of the people of the godly kingdom extremely high so that they could provide a source of power for themselves. Therefore, what Gu Nan needed to do now was to manage this world in advance and nurture high-level practitioners. Of course, managing the godly kingdom had to deal with big and small matters. Gu Nan definitely could not do everything by himself. He needed a group of assistants to assist him. Then, he turned to look at Yan Xiaoxiao. Are you willing to be the manager here? Planet Xianhuang. When Lan Si appeared in front of him, Red Tail showed a surprised expression. You're back so soon. Has the matter with the Lord been settled? We can't contact him anymore. Lan Si shook her head lightly. She was inexplicably kicked out of the reincarnation process. Until now, she did not understand what had happened. But now, her brain seemed to be a little more useful. She heard something else in Red Tail's words. She looked up and asked, What happened here? Red Tail was silent for a moment, then smiled bitterly. Nothing happened for the time being, but I'm afraid it won't be quiet for long. After that, she picked up a strange-looking letter and gave it to Lon Si. On the cover, the words, Shanghai Pavilion, were written. This. Lon Si was shocked and looked up. She was no longer the ignorant girl she once was. She knew what those 3 words meant. The Shanghai Pavilion and the Federation government have jointly announced that all the supernaturals must go to the central system to be certified. In the future, there will be no practice in the system without a certificate. Red Tail looked helpless. Lon Si had never been to the central system, so she found this overbearing behavior unbelievable. How many supernaturals are there in the other 8 systems? How dare they do this? Her voice rose a little. Will anyone listen to them? Based on past practice, they will send inspection teams to each system. Red Tail clearly knew the style of Shanghai Pavilion. At least 2 world breakers will lead the teams. In the fairy demon world, Gu Nan looked at the broken world and shook his head. This is my seal, and the connection to the outside world has been temporarily cut off. In the current fairy demon world, world breakers could force their way in from the outside, but it was impossible for those below world breakers. This place did not accept reincarnation. Even Gu Nan himself could not leave the fairy demon world before he could control the origin. He was not interested in other things right now. On planet Xianwang, the only thing he really cared about was Lan Si's sin point. Under his arrangement, Yan Xiaoxiao had gone to clean up the mess. The fairy demon world would soon usher in a world revolution. It would be a society that they could not understand. It was a society that belonged to the players. First, I will rebuild the God Kingdom. When everything is on the right track, and the origin of the world can be controlled, then I will think about things over there. Gu Nan quickly made a decision, but before that, he had another thing to do. Chapter 193. Beginning construction of second exclusive rule. Extracting prerequisite rule, please choose from the known abilities. Choose the following abilities. Dawn's Praise Passivation. Confirm? Please confirm the ability input ratio, exclusive rule construction in progress. As Gu Nan operated in the Evil God's Temple, a series of notifications appeared. He was in the process of constructing his exclusive rule, and it was already in the waiting phase. In the Evil God game, the construction of rules was a very interesting thing. What kind of rule a player could construct was completely dependent on the materials invested and the ratio of the materials' abilities. And the source of the materials was the equipment and skills that the players had previously possessed. Therefore, constructing the rule that one wanted became a subject of study. Fortunately, the 4th grade was just the beginning in the game. The players had enough courage to experiment. Even if they had to waste their saves, they would not feel the pinch. After countless painstaking lessons from their predecessors, they finally concluded these 3 rules. 1. Never invest more than 3 abilities at once. That was no different from buying a lottery ticket. 2. The constructed rule was related to the type of ability invested, but it was not absolutely related. 3. The ratio was very important. Very important. Very important. If too many abilities were invested at once, the final rule would basically be unrelated to any of the abilities. It would deviate to an unimaginable realm. The obtained rule was not completely dependent on the type of ability invested. It did not mean that if you invested 2 high damage abilities, the resulting rule would definitely be an output type rule. It could also be a healer rule. On the other hand, the ratio of input was sometimes more important than the ability itself. It was what truly determined the bias of the obtained rule. Of course, all this was actually meaningless to Gu Nan. He did not need to do any experiments at all. The plan he adopted was naturally one that he had experimented with countless times in his previous life. He was completely certain of the result. Second exclusive rule, resurrection, construction completed. Gu Nan's eyes lit up. He immediately opened his interface to take a look. Sure enough, the resurrection rule was quietly lying there. The resurrection rule was actually not the original rule that Gu Nan had conceived for himself. It was a temporary decision to construct after obtaining the immortal demon world. The resurrection rule originated from the two abilities, Dawn's Praise and Passivation. The name sounded like a restorative effect, but in fact it had nothing to do with recovery. This rule wasn't used on Gu Nan himself, but for someone else to use. The correct way to activate resurrection was those who were killed by Gu Nan with the power of shadow, or those who were successfully infused with the law of shadow shortly after death, could be resurrected through the shadow body. This description seemed complicated, but it was actually very simple. This was the law of recruiting underlings. As long as Gu Nan killed someone with his own hands, or was discovered by Gu Nan not long after their death, he could resurrect them into his shadow body to work for him. According to the game's model, the shadow body would retain its core abilities after resurrection, but apart from some special circumstances, most of its memories would not be retained. If it was a high-level monster, it would have a certain degree of intelligence after resurrection. However, this intelligence came from the reconstruction of the rules and had nothing to do with the monster when it was alive. Gu Nan's consciousness returned to reality, and as he sensed the aura of the new laws, he revealed a satisfied smile. This way, I won't have to worry about the manpower to manage the divine kingdom. Gu Nan's decision to create resurrection at the last minute was, of course, not for fun. His ultimate goal was to manage his own divine kingdom. After all, reincarnators were unreliable, and the natives were disobedient, so he could only create his own underlings. Even for players like him who walked the path of strengthening themselves, the resurrection law was a little incompatible. Usually, only players who played the summoning style would choose this law. Because in terms of combat, the underlings could not help him much. They were purely used for management. In this way, Gu Nan actually lost out on a law. However, if other players had such an opportunity, they would definitely be willing. This was a chance to start managing a divine kingdom at grade 4. Unfortunately, when he killed Land Marigold, Gu Nan, and Stothan, he did not have this law. Otherwise, if he could resurrect them, it would be equivalent to having a lot of underlings. In a small manor in the city of no return, Gu Nan lay leisurely on a rocking chair, covering his head with a book. It was noon, and the sun shone on his body, making him feel lazy. At this time, it was already more than 2 months after the great battle. The origin was stabilizing, and the chaos of the world was gradually recovering. That chaotic battle, which people called the Great Destruction, was said to be a battle between the top cultivators, which caused the sky to collapse and the earth to crack. The sun and moon lost their light, and even the sun disappeared for a few days. In the end, the winner of that battle was the Hall Master of Blue Dragon Hall. After all, she was the only one alive. Teacher. Yan Xiaoxiao stood beside Gu Nan, lifted the book covering his face, and said helplessly, "The Yan Kingdom and the Tianyun sect have already announced their surrender. Should we accept it?" "Of course," Gu Nan said decisively, but then yawned. "Try to resolve it peacefully, don't kill too many people." Yan Xiaoxiao showed an expression as if she had seen a ghost, and looked at him strangely, as if she didn't know him anymore. Gu Nan sensed her gaze and explained, "Even if they are civilians, they are worth a basic unit of divine power. It would be a pity to kill them. Just think of it as me being merciful." The power of the living beings in the God Kingdom represented the upper limit of the power that players could obtain from the God Kingdom. In a good place like the immortal demon world, Gu Nan could directly extract power, which meant that he could obtain the maximum power. Players could ignore the lives of NPCs, but for things that belonged to them, they would definitely be stingy, and they would fall out with anyone who dared to touch them. Of course, Yan Xiaoxiao didn't understand what he was talking about, but she could understand the gist of it. After all, the lives of civilians were useful to her teacher. Are there many cultivators left? Gu Nan asked. There are quite a few, but there aren't many powerful ones, especially extraordinaires. Yan Xiaoxiao said as she looked at him strangely. She knew better than anyone else who killed those strong people. Is that so? Gu Nan frowned. Then we can only think of a way to groom them. Yan Xiaoxiao's eyes lit up and she said, those reincarnated people left behind many cultivation methods. If we can build a unified country and use the power of the country to promote it, the power of the cultivators will definitely increase very quickly. As the ruler of the Blue Dragon Hall for more than 20 years, Yan Xiaoxiao had certainly thought of this problem. She had even thought about what kind of system she would set up if she had a unified empire, so as to achieve the best effect of promoting talents and obtaining the most backbone military forces. No, we don't need a unified empire. But Gu Nan clearly wasn't going to use her suggestion. Gu Nan looked at her and said, do you know where it's most likely to produce strong people? Yan Xiaoxiao was stunned. After many years of training, she wasn't an ignorant person, and she subconsciously said, the battlefield. Chapter 194. How to increase the strength of the Kingdom of God's citizens in the most efficient way. This question was also discussed by the players on a large scale. However, unlike the exclusive rule formula with a standard answer, this was purely a matter of the wise man's opinion. The players focused on 3 indicators: the average strength of the Kingdom of God's citizens, the number of powerhouses among the citizens, and the proportion of power obtained. The first 2 determined the upper limit of power that could be obtained, while the third determined the actual power obtained. Gu Nan was more convenient. The special origin of the immortal demon world allowed him to directly collect the power of the citizens in the future without caring about whether they were willing or not. With the city of no return as the boundary, the continent will be divided into 2 pieces, and each side will have 50 city-states. Gu Nan's voice was emotionless. Every 6 months there will be a competition between the powerhouses of the East and the West. The losing side will randomly select a portion of the population from each city-state and exile them to the other side as official sparring partners. No matter which side, they will have to accept our jurisdiction. Those who dare to resist will have the same fate, to become sandbags. Gu Nan used as concise a description as possible to tell Yan Xiaoxiao his vision for the future of the Kingdom of God. Simply put, it was to do everything possible to make everyone have no choice but to cultivate hard. If they didn't do this, although they wouldn't die, it might be more painful than death. It wasn't only the 2 sides of the continent that had to do this. From the continent to the city-states, and then to the city-states, everyone would follow this set of procedures. In the end, the members who would represent one side would definitely be the result of layers of selection. Yan Xiaoxiao gradually understood Gu Nan's plan, but the expression on her face was more dull than excited. Everyone's range of activity will be limited to the city-states. We will control the movement between the city-states. Those who leave the city without permission will be killed. We? Do you mean Blue Dragon Hall? Yan Xiaoxiao had a bad feeling. Of course not. Gu Nan said without hesitation, Blue Dragon Hall will be the main force of the 50 city-states in the West. I will provide the manpower to assist you later. If it wasn't for this, he wouldn't have created the law of resurrection and wasted a law pain. As if reading Yan Xiaoxiao's mind, Gu Nan smiled and said, you have to understand one thing. What I need is a high and mighty God, not someone who will be affected by the secular world. Yan Xiaoxiao lowered her gaze and said to herself, God? What if I choose to become a human? Then I'll find someone else to replace you. You'll belong to a city-state with the people of Blue Dragon Hall, said Gu Nan. You should be glad. You can still stand here because I don't have a better choice for now. Gu Nan did not hide his dissatisfaction with Yan Xiaoxiao. In fact, whether it was Gu Nian, Land Marigold, or even Lan Si, they were all more suitable than Yan Xiaoxiao for this task. Unfortunately, these 3 people were either dead or unable to stay here for a long time. None of them were suitable for this task. Managing a divine kingdom was a long-term and extremely tedious job. There were too many things to deal with, and it was impossible to rely on reincarnators. Yan Xiaoxiao's horizons were still too low. She had not experienced the baptism of countless worlds, so she naturally could not come up with the mentality of indifference to human life. Listening to Gu Nan's extremely straightforward words, Yan Xiaoxiao fell silent again, and did not speak for a long time. I taught you how to kill people back then, and I also taught you how to kill your own people. Now I'll teach you another lesson. As Gu Nan said this, the two of them disappeared. The next moment they appeared in the west of the continent, in the newly rebuilt headquarters of Blue Dragon Hall. Hall Master! Hall Master! The upper echelons of Blue Dragon Hall quickly noticed the two of them and greeted them with joy on their faces. They had reason to be happy. They had inexplicably won the battle in the city of no return. The country and sect in the east were like a group of dragons without a leader, waiting for them to reap the harvest. Blue Dragon Hall's unification of the world was just around the corner. The continent's first female empress might be born soon, and they would all be the subjects of the dragon. How could they not be happy? Hall Master, when are we leaving? A middle-aged man walked up, his face filled with obvious excitement, as well as undisguised ambition. This person was called Dong Xiang. He was one of the most famous generals among the upper echelons of Blue Dragon Hall, and he was also one of the most enthusiastic people about war. There was indeed no need to hide anything. Blue Dragon Hall had struggled for more than 20 years, and it was finally time for the fruits to ripen. What reason was there not to pluck them? Although the Hall Master seemed to be a little strange recently, often appearing and disappearing without a trace, why did he bring a gigolo over today? Dong Xiang? He glanced at Gu Nan, who was next to Yan Xiaoxiao, and couldn't help but smile. The Hall Master had been alone for more than 20 years. Now that the world was at his fingertips, it was time to relax. However, the expressionless young man's first words stunned him. Did you see that? An ant that is destined to die is actually calling you brother. What? What did you say? Dong Xiang was furious. Although he didn't quite understand what this person meant, his condescending look was annoying at first glance. The next moment, he saw the young man wave his hand gently, and a mass of black inexplicably appeared. Then, his vision turned black, and he completely lost consciousness. Dong Xiang's head exploded directly. Gu Nan's expression didn't change at all. Instead, as he died, a shadow gradually rose from his corpse, and soon turned into a dark human figure. It bowed and said, "Master?" This was, of course, the application of the law of resurrection. Gu Nan looked at Dong Xiang, who had transformed from the shadow body. Actually, he wasn't too satisfied. He could only say that it was barely usable. The law of resurrection, which was driven by the power of shadow, was somewhat nondescript. Not only did the servant only have the most basic intelligence, but even the body only had the outer skin, and the inside was still a mass of shadow. If it moved slightly, it would be obvious that it wasn't a human. He hadn't used the law of resurrection in his previous life. In the hands of summoner players, they had all kinds of abilities to repair it, but Gu Nan didn't have the time. After all, it's just a last-minute effort. I'll just make do with it. Anyway, it's only used in the godly nation. While Gu Nan was observing the created shadow servant, the Blue Dragon Hall was in an uproar. Dong Xiang was killed in front of them. No one could accept this. Hall Master, who is he? The great cause is about to be accomplished. Hall Master, are you already impatient to attack us old brothers? Questions and curses filled Yan Xiaoxiao's ears, making her feel more and more conflicted. Teacher, can you let them go? Since she saw Dong Xiang's appearance after his death, she understood what Gu Nan wanted to do. You're the god who wants to manage these mortals. Gu Nan looked at her coldly. Sympathy, pity, vanity, anger, and other emotions aren't what you need. As he said this, Gu Nan's shadow body kept pouncing out, slaughtering the senior officials of Blue Dragon Hall one by one. Yan Xiaoxiao could only watch this scene quietly. She knew that she couldn't resist. She had always been a smart person. If I don't have those, what do I have left? She raised her head and asked as if she was talking to herself. Chapter 195. Yan Xiaoxiao had the opportunity to go very far, whether in terms of her own conditions or external opportunities. The more difficult the law, the easier it was to break through the threshold of the 4th level. Her own infiltration was undoubtedly one of such laws. On the other hand, during the previous battle, she had temporarily reached the 4th level with the help of Shui Yan's power, which was a treatment that others could only beg for. How powerful was the 4th level experience? It was evident from the fact that she directly stepped into the Eternal Domain realm in just 2 months. Therefore, from all aspects, Yan Xiaoxiao was a good manager of the Divine Kingdom. All she lacked was temperament. As for temperament, it could be trained. Gu Nan was too skilled at killing entire families. In just a moment, all the high-level members of Blue Dragon Hall had become his shadow servants. Gu Nan needed the first batch of people to assist Yan Xiaoxiao in taking control of the Divine Kingdom. Whether in terms of strength or influence on Yan Xiaoxiao, it was better for the people of Blue Dragon Hall to die. Gu Nan could afford the loss of such people. When these people lined up neatly in a row and stood in front of him, Gu Nan said to Yan Xiaoxiao, "They will be your subordinates. I don't want to see any more living people in the wild for at most 3 months." Just as Gu Nan began to set up his divine kingdom, Red Tail and Lan Si on the mysterious yellow planet were trying various ways to contact him. It still doesn't work. The coordinates of the immortal demon world haven't changed, but the reincarnations have all failed. It's like that plane has been sealed. Red Tail's face was a little gloomy as he spoke. The people of Shanghai Pavilion would come soon. If they couldn't contact Gu Nan, it would be troublesome. For her, whether Gu Nan chose to fall out or obey, she didn't care. Anyway, Shanghai Pavilion wouldn't make things difficult for a small figure like her. However, Gu Nan wasn't around, so the pressure of making a choice was on her. If she chose to resist, Shanghai Pavilion would immediately let her know the meaning of power. If she chose to be obedient, who could guarantee that Gu Nan would not cause trouble for her when he returned? How long before they arrive? Lan Si was silent for a moment, then suddenly asked. She had tried to use the small sword and godhood that Gu Nan had left behind, but the news that she had sent out had all sunk into the ocean. There was no response at all. It was as if Gu Nan had vanished from the face of the earth. If not for the fact that she could still use the small black sword, she would have thought that Gu Nan had fallen in the immortal demon world. "Half a month at most," Red Tail quietly said. "When Star Sea Pavilion does things, they always do things quickly. That is especially true when it comes to break world levels." The break world people were all very busy. They were forced by the Shanghai Pavilion sign. Normally, they would not be willing to do such a small thing. Lan Si's face did not look too good. In the past, she could not imagine what Shanghai Pavilion was going to do. After all, they were forcing all the extraordinaires to register. That was too unbelievable. How many cultivators were hidden among the people and in space? Not every system was like Black-Yellow Planet, where all the cultivators were gathered on the planet. In the 9th system, many resources were in space, so most of the cultivators were there. How was Shanghai Pavilion going to manage these people? Now Lan Si understood. There was nothing difficult to manage. If they did not listen, they could just kill them. Of course, it was very satisfying for him to do this kind of thing, but when it fell on his head, it was not so satisfying. "Prepare for the worst," Lan Si said with a sigh, then turned around and left. There was a fire in her eyes that had never been there before. When a person was used to being a strong person, when she saw someone stronger than her, she would show an unimaginable desire to improve. Lan Si did not lack anything in the past, but she lacked this. Deep in space, A starship was in the process of jumping between systems. Its huge body gradually appeared in the sixth system. How long has it been? I did not expect to come to this broken place again. Zhou Xiaojing sat on the starship, mumbling with a bristle grass in his mouth. He had been to the sixth system with Shui Yan to distribute star seals to Gunan. He still had some bad memories. This time, he was representing Shanghai Pavilion to come to the sixth system to supervise all the extraordinaires and go to the central system for registration. That was why he was sitting on the starship. The Break World people could tear the space to come here, but the staff below could not. I heard that Luo Jie and Luo Fei were killed. Now the sixth system has a new owner? Someone next to him asked when he saw him like this. This person was also a young man. He wore a red round hat on his head. He looked inconspicuous. To be able to talk to Zhou Xiaojing like that, it was obvious who he was. He was another Break World person. Yes, a man named Gunan. He is a new Break World person, Zhou Xiaojing casually answered. He then added, he is crazy. That means he is not easy to deal with? The young man with the red hat was interested. He sat up and asked. With his understanding of Zhou Xiaojing, only an opponent who was not weak could have such an evaluation. The weak did not need to be evaluated. Zhou Xiaojing shook his head and did not say anything. He said, let's go look at the information. The king of the deep sea was defeated by him, and it is said that the Buddha also fought with him. With Shanghai Pavilion's power, the details of the fight on planet Xianhuang could not be hidden from them. Before they sent out an inspection team, they had given them all the information about the sixth system. Of course, it was information that these people had worked so hard to get. Whether or not the Break World people were interested in it was another matter. After hearing Zhou Xiaojing's words, the young man with the red hat looked surprised. Deep Sea King's face changed. Deep Sea King was not a big deal. He just lived a little longer. After Bloodkins entered the Break World, they did not have much of an advantage. A real king? The one who was moved was the Buddha. The young girl, No Return, had made a scene in Shanghai Pavilion. In front of a leader, she had killed Sky's secret path master. That had created a lot of noise inside Shanghai Pavilion. Many people thought the reason there was such a big operation was because the pavilion was angry about what had happened. Registering all the transcendents was a sign that they were going to do something. It was not just a simple registration. 10,000 Buddha woke up in the sixth system. Could Gu Nan have something to do with this? King quietly said. Zhou Xiaojing was shocked. He thought it was possible. When he first came here, Sky's secret had not been killed, so he did not think about it. Now, King? When he mentioned it, it broke his blind spot. It looks like this Gu Nan needs to be investigated. Zhou Xiaojing's face looked serious. He is not easy to deal with, is he? Chapter 196. Fairy Demon World. In the blink of an eye, more than a month had passed. The layout of the 50 city-states on both sides of Gu Nan had already taken shape. There was even a dividing line. Of course, the dividing line that Gu Nan had casually drawn was obviously more symbolic. In the system that Gu Nan had set up, the people could not even leave the city-state. All traffic between the city-states had to go through the Shadow Servant. What was the point of having a dividing line? Ever since the Blue Dragon Hall had been slaughtered by Gu Nan, Yan Xiaoxiao's actions had become a lot more efficient. Correspondingly, her emotions had lessened. She had become less and less concerned about killing. Or rather, she had always been like that. She only cared about what she wanted to care about. Now, the people she cared about were all dead. Gu Nan was very satisfied with this. He never liked to test people. Even if the other party had a 99% chance of making the right choice, there was still a 1% chance of making the wrong decision. Instead of reaching that step, it was better to not give her a choice in the first place. He would use external conditions to force her to walk the path that Gu Nan wanted her to walk. Yan Xiaoxiao might not have been very knowledgeable, but there was something about her that Gu Nan admired. She was smart, or rather smart. She would never do anything irrational. Even when she wanted to stay in the fairy demon world, she found a way to leave a thorn in Gu Nan's heart. She made him decide not to use her. Now, she did not even have the right to leave a thorn in his heart. Even if she entered the break world, she was just someone that Gu Nan could kill with a wave of his hand. What was the point? After obtaining the break world power, Gu Nan's eyes were already on the level 5-star master. Otherwise, he would not have created a rule column to create rebirth. Teacher, the establishment of the city-states is basically complete, but the travel restriction order has not been implemented yet. We do not have enough manpower. Yan Xiaoxiao stood next to Gu Nan and frowned. The main thing is we are not strong enough. The travel restriction was, of course, a ban on leaving the city, but it was still too early to reach this step. There were about 100 people in Blue Dragon Hall's upper echelons. It seemed like a large number, but it wasn't enough to cover the entire continent. Moreover, these people only had simple intelligence, and their strength was actually weaker than when they were alive. It was even more impossible for them to defend the wilderness. No matter how well the city was built, there were still plenty of places for people to smuggle in. Gu Nan had never expected a ban to make everyone obey him. He preferred to let a small number of people sneak out and then send shadow servants to hunt them down. These people could also provide power to Gu Nan. If the stowaways could return to the city, Gu Nan would give them full citizen treatment. In Gu Nan's vision, the city-state was used to nurture the core forces, while the wilderness, which was filled with life and death battles, was more suitable to nurture the top experts. Let's do this for now. There is no rush to announce the hierarchy. Let people get used to the city-state system first, Gu Nan said with a smile. I will solve the problem of manpower. He specifically created the resurrection rule because of the special nature of the shadow servants. Those shadow servants were essentially a part of his shadow power. He could carry them with him and travel between dimensions at will. In other words, Gu Nan could cultivate shadow servants in other dimensions and put them in the God Kingdom. It's time to go back. He raised his right hand. There was an origin floating in the air, but it was covered with a thick black fog. It was impossible to see its original appearance. On planet Xianwang, the inspection team of Xinghai Pavilion had arrived. Red Tail was the person in charge here, so she had to come out and greet them. So, you can't contact Mr. Gu Nan for now? King Wang looked at Red Tail with a smile, but his eyes were more or less unfriendly. Yes. Red Tail took a deep breath and struggled to maintain a calm tone. She was a person who had seen the world. She would not lose her composure because of the appearance of a world breaker, but in front of her, there were 4 world breakers. Zhou Xiaojing had been here before, so she recognized him. And this King Wang? Although he was not famous, he did not look easy to deal with. The most important thing was, Red Tail secretly looked to the side. There was a man and a woman with no expression on their faces. Those two were too famous. It was them. Red Tail screamed in her heart. Xinghai Pavilion gave Gu Nan too much treatment, and it was not the treatment she wanted to see. Wang was silent. He stared at Red Tail for a while and did not say anything. He just waved his hand to let her leave. After Red Tail left, Zhou Xiaojing immediately said, Gu Nan is not here. Is he deliberately avoiding us? It is common for world breakers to go to other dimensions. That does not mean anything. Wang shook his head. But for him to disappear at this time is a bit of a coincidence. Xinghai Pavilion required all transcendents to register, but they deliberately ignored world breakers. They had no choice. After all, world breakers could break space and leave the world at any time. They could also come back from other dimensions. How could they find them to register? It was too difficult to do. Even Xinghai Pavilion could not do anything about it. We must find Gu Nan. Before Tianji died, he mentioned him many times, the man suddenly said. His face was stiff. It was like he could not move. Wang? He and Zhou Xiaojing stopped talking at the same time. Then, they said, of course. Wang? They could not help but think, when the Buddha made a mess in the pavilion, this man was there. It looked like he was humiliated. The people in the pavilion are going to investigate all the transcendence here. According to the information from the other systems, this will take at least a month. We can wait for him. Wang? With that said, the man nodded lightly and closed his eyes to continue resting. The woman next to him spoke, but it was not to Wang. Instead, it was to the man. Dad, little Een is in trouble again. I will go and see. Okay. The man nodded. Lock your sister up for a few days. Don't think that you can do whatever you want when you are out of the central system. The woman left quickly. When she left, she did not forget to say goodbye to Wang. The two of them apologized. They were extremely polite. Wang and Zhou Xiaojing looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Going on a mission with this father and daughter pair was definitely something that people loved and hated at the same time. They loved that they were strong. As long as they found the right way, they would be easy to get along with. What they hated the most was that they would definitely bring along a little burden. Moreover, their family of 3 was, to be honest, not normal at all. Then we will go and make arrangements. Wang bowed to the man. If we find traces of Gunan, we will have to trouble you, Mr. Duanmu. Chapter 197. Little Een, what are you doing here? A shout came from behind. Duanmu Een turned around unhappily. She pouted and looked behind her. Her big sister, Duanmu Nianlan, had a straight face. Her expression was just like her father's. It was like they were carved from the same mold. She stared at Duanmu Een. I didn't do anything. I was just walking around. Duanmu Een looked like she had been wronged. Duanmu Nianlan did not care about her innocence at all. She was bowing to 2 ordinary members of the White Mist. I am very sorry. I hope my sister did not cause you trouble. Her voice was very calm. She did not look embarrassed at all. It was important to know that this was a world breaker. For him to apologize so sincerely, it was a shame to be called a world breaker, which was so high up. One of them quickly waved his hand and said, It was no trouble. They did not know who this person really was. They only knew she was an important guest of the organization. The other person had a similar expression. He said, Yes, your sister is very cute. We all like her. After he said that, he and his partner did not feel anything, but Duanmu Een was already holding her forehead. Duanmu Nianlan's face changed. She angrily shouted, How dare you flirt with my sister? You have a death wish. Before the 2 of them could react, she punched the person in the stomach. A break-world person's power was scary. Even without any rule powers, it was enough to rip open a person's stomach. This punch directly smashed the man's internal organs, and his body swayed as he fell to the ground. His companion was completely dumbfounded and said in a daze, Sir, that's not what he meant. He just, Duanmu Nianlan pulled back her hand. Hearing him, she asked, Then what did he mean? He just. The partner looked at her carefully and quietly said, He just wanted to compliment your sister. Is that so? Duanmu Nianlan frowned. She turned around and looked at her sister. Little Een, is what he said true? Yes. Duanmu Een weakly said. Thus, Duanmu Nianlan was silent for a moment before bowing to the corpse in front of her. I misunderstood your intentions and killed you by mistake. Please forgive me, I'm sorry. After saying that, she turned to her sister and said, All right, come home with me now. You're not allowed to sneak out to play anymore, do you hear me? Got it. I'm going back to my room to rest. Okay, sleep early. Duanmu Een waved her hand impatiently and walked into her room. Without a word, she opened the window and jumped out. Then, she pursed her lip. It's so frustrating to have 2 family members with mental problems. Duanmu Een complained as she walked in the direction she came from. Because of their special bloodline, Every descendant has all kinds of personality flaws? What a strange family. I really don't know how that little girl managed to persevere until now, forget it. Hurry up and find that guy. Whether or not my power can return to break world class depends on him. Duan Muin raised her head. Her eyes shone with a deep light. She did not look like a little girl. Gu Nan returned to planet Xianhuang. He was inside the white mist. He had prepared a lab for himself. There were still remnants of his previous arrangements here. There were a few living people, who were materials prepared for the soul substitution experiment. Of course, they were already dead. He did not expect to be gone for so long. No one would dare enter his lab. Those people had used up all the culture fluid. When they woke up, they were starved to death. After Gu Nan returned, he noticed Lan Si and Red Tail were talking to each other. He was like a person whose phone had run out of battery. When he turned it on, he found a bunch of text messages and phone calls. At the same time, the shadow body he had left there was reactivated. Because the fairy demon world was cut off from the outside world, the connection between him and the shadow body was cut off. Countless memories and information surged into his mind. Gu Nan was informed of what happened here at the first moment. For break world people? Interesting. I was just worried about not having enough brothers. Oh, and there is a familiar presence? With the strength of Gu Nan's soul, even such a large amount of information couldn't bring him much pressure, and he quickly noticed something unusual. It was a shadow body hiding in the dark. The shadow he found was very similar to the presence he remembered. But that person should not be here. At this time, the lab's door was pushed open. There was a small figure standing there. It matched the one in Gu Nan's memory. It was Duanmu Yin. Miss Duanmu. Gu Nan smiled. He slowly stood up and said, "Or should I call you Mr. Purple Will?" Little Yin is gone again. Duanmu Nianlan walked out of her sister's room. Her face was still expressionless. It was hard to tell if she was happy or angry. Duanmu Sun put down the book in his hand and said, "Go find her. If she causes trouble for others, remember to be polite." "I understand." Duanmu Nianlan nodded. The Duanmu family always uses peaceful means before using force. We will not bully others. Duanmu Sin nodded happily. Compared to his second daughter, who always made him angry, his eldest daughter was much less worrisome. She was also very sensible and reassured him. Just like today, she accidentally killed someone because of her younger sister. However, since she apologized sincerely, the other party probably wouldn't blame her. No one had come looking for her, so no one would blame her. In the lab, Gu Nan and Duanmu Yin sat facing each other. The latter said, "I don't have much time. That woman with mental problems will come and take me away soon. So listen to me first." Gu Nan expressed his attitude with a single word. Duanmu Yin, or rather, the invincible Purple Will Star Lord, who was once in the Silken World with Gu Nan, took a deep breath. "Zwa killed my main body. Chiu Wenran is most likely dead." The moment she opened her mouth, she revealed an earth-shattering news. "It took me a lot of effort to keep this strand of soul. I need your help." Gu Nan frowned. He did not speak. He was considering the veracity of her words. Duanmu Yin stared at him and said loudly, "He is silencing everyone who has seen you in the All Heavens star path. You must have a big secret on you." She did not wait for Gu Nan to reply. She quickly said, "My consciousness is about to enter a deep slumber. This girl will return. On a moonlit night, help me kill those two with the surname Duanmu. Give me their blood." Chapter 198. Duanmu Yin's crisp voice echoed in the quiet laboratory, but all she got was Gu Nan's expressionless face. "You might be mistaken about something." Gu Nan stood up and scratched his head after listening to her. "What did you say?" Duanmu Yin said coldly. "Do you know what level Zwa is at?" "You." Gu Nan's shadow sword pierced through her chest. Duanmu Yin looked on in disbelief as she lost all signs of life. The girl who claimed to have a purple will split soul slowly collapsed in front of Gu Nan. Gu Nan walked slowly to her corpse and looked down at her. The shadow power in his hand spread out evenly, but his face was expressionless. Gu Nan did not believe a single word that Duan Mu Yin said. Of course, he knew that there must be some truth in her words, but to players, knowing the facts was not enough to determine which words were true, so they might as well not believe them at all. Under Gu Nan's control, the shadow power was slowly used on the girl's corpse with the aura of the law of resurrection. He was trying to control the law of resurrection on his own so that the resurrection would be more detailed, and he would try his best to preserve the soul on the corpse. The Evil God game had a very important characteristic, which was that it paid extreme attention to details and authenticity. Apart from the Evil God Temple, the players could not feel that this was a game. Not only were the various subjects in the game real, but even the law of resurrection could also be controlled. It was not like a skill that could only be activated with a click. Gu Nan had used the law of resurrection more than 100 times, which was enough for a professional player like him to figure out the rules. The soul of a body that had just died would not dissipate immediately. The more intact the body, the more it would be. On the other hand, using the law of resurrection to reconstruct the body, he would first use the shadow power to repair the damaged parts, then slowly replace the operating mechanism of the entire carbon-based life, and the entire resurrection process would be completed. Normally, Gu Nan would not be willing to do this, because it would be very tiring for him, and he would need to spend a lot of energy. Fortunately, this body is only at the innate stage. Otherwise, who knows how long it would take for my soul to escape. Gu Nan mumbled. After all, he was a player who walked the path of combat. Even though he had played the undead path of repairing corpses all day long, he still couldn't make bricks without straw. He had too few relevant skills at hand. After a while, Gu Nan finally heaved a sigh of relief and slowly withdrew his hand. Tell me, how many memories do you still have? Gu Nan's voice contained a rare hint of exhaustion. This kind of extremely detailed and completely manual operation was not something a human could do. Yes, master. Duan Mu Yin stood up and said expressionlessly. Compared to those shoddily made fellows in the immortal demon world, her body was much more normal. At first glance, there was no difference from when she was alive. Since the corpse was well preserved and had not been sliced up by the shadow body, the body was still intact. However, the heart was no longer beating, and the blood was no longer flowing. Instead, it was replaced by a pitch-black shadow. Even her entire body was a little darker. If she was sliced up now, all the blood vessels in her body would be black. I am Purple Will, Purple Will's clone. Her main body was injured in the Purple Sieve Heaven. Duan Mu Yin seemed to be trying her best to remember. Gu Nan nodded lightly. The shadow servant would not lie to him. This meant that Purple Will was indeed not telling the truth. Her main body was clearly still alive. Perhaps it was indeed injured by Zwa. However, this was normal. If it was Gu Nan himself, he would definitely hide his own situation. Using the clone to recover the main body, what else? Zwa, the strongest below the 13 heavens. What's the 13 heavens? Gu Nan asked with a frown. However, after thinking for a while, Duan Mu Yin shook her head slowly. Clearly, she did not retain this part of her memory. What she could retain was definitely the deepest impression and the thing that she paid the most attention to when she was alive. If it was a common memory, it was normal for her to choose to forget it. Duan Mu Yin started to ramble again. However, most of it was useless information or terms that Gu Nan did not understand at all. It was only when she mentioned a topic that it suddenly caught Gu Nan's attention. Gu Nan entering the star path in advance, secret. Think about this carefully. Gu Nan hurriedly interrupted her. At the same time, his heart sank. If the shadow servant said this, it meant that Purple Will had actually seen through his strength. Among the 3 astral lords, perhaps only Chiu Wenran, the junior, really thought that he was a astral lord. Astral lord, what a dangerous thing! Gu Nan's gaze was slightly cold. Even so, he could not give up on the private instance. Even if it was like drinking poison to quench his thirst, he had to drink it. Without points, he could not level up. Wouldn't he be stuck at the 4th level forever? Lead him to the Duanmu family's ancestral tomb, where it's left behind. Duanmu Yin finally said these few words. It was difficult for her to make any more progress. However, Gu Nan still heaved a sigh of relief. What he was most afraid of was not having any clues. As long as there was a path to take, he could always find more things along the way. Duanmu family's ancestral tomb? Gu Nan rubbed his chin. This direction was enough. Purple Will's choice to possess this girl was clearly not a random choice. It was intentional. At this moment, the laboratory door was pushed open again. Duanmu Nianlan's figure appeared at the door. Beside her was a white mist member who was trying to persuade her. Master, this is the organization's forbidden ground. You, little Yin, it's great that you're alright. Duanmu Nianlan completely ignored him and said in relief. However, when paired with her perpetually stony face and emotionless tone, it sounded very strange. Gu Nan glanced at her and controlled the shadow servant to go forward. Sis, where is our ancestral tomb? Ancestral tomb? Duanmu Nianlan was a little hesitant. Of course it's in our old home on the Jade Flower Planet. Why are you asking about this? The Jade Flower Planet was one of the main planets of the central star field. Gu Nan knew about this. Having such a clue about the location was enough. A smile appeared on Gu Nan's face. Even the shadow servant, Duanmu Yin, smiled strangely. This smile appeared on a girl's face. It was indeed a little scary. In the next moment, Gu Nan's fist had already landed. With the power to break through everything, it suddenly smashed down with unparalleled power. You! Duanmu Nianlan's reaction was extremely fast. She had just said one word when her body had already started moving. She immediately retaliated with a punch. Some kind of illusory image seemed to appear behind her. It was a dignified statue that was staring coldly at Gu Nan. Chapter 199. There were gods in the west, and there were gods in the east. Gu Nan naturally had some understanding of the power systems in the heavens, and he also knew that the gods in the east were completely different from the gods in his memories. Even though they both used the power of faith to cultivate, and even had the same goal in the end, there was a huge difference between the two, especially before rank 5. Gods could only be gods after rank 1, and gods could use the power of faith from the very beginning. A strange majesty started to appear, gradually surrounding Duanmu Nianlan. Even the magic-breaking power could not instantly break through it. It was not that the magic-breaking attribute did not have a nemesis. Special existences like the power of faith could weaken its ability to erase. And this little delay was enough in the battle. The magic-breaking power could not completely break through Duanmu Nianlan's power. Her fist shone brightly as it collided with Gu Nan. Crack! Crack! 2 cracking sounds rang out at the same time. Gu Nan took a step back, the bones in his hand had already been shattered, and a huge crack had also appeared on the statue behind him. Duanmu Nianlan had a solemn expression as she said, "As long as the power of faith is not extinguished, my golden body of the divine Tao can repair itself, and you, bang!" Gu Nan fiercely punched down again, hitting Duanmu Nianlan's shoulder. The statue continued to crack, and the bones in his hand did not have a chance to heal. You! Duanmu Nianlan's eyes widened in anger. She could only watch as a figure flew up and down, punching her continuously. At Gu Nan's current level, the martial arts and fighting techniques of the mortal world were a joke. With the rank 4 heretic god body and his agility, his speed was so fast that the enemy could not react, and no one could dodge his attack. In the blink of an eye, Gu Nan had punched out 392 times consecutively, smashing the statue into pieces. Meanwhile, Duanmu Nianlan's face was already swollen, and her body was covered in bloody holes from the tremendous force. Gu Nan's hands were also bloody, and it could even be said that his hands were no longer in shape, they were like two lumps of flesh. However, while Gu Nan's hand was rapidly recovering, the broken statue was not so lucky. Duanmu Nianlan didn't even have a chance to speak before her heart was shattered by Gu Nan's punch. The first one. Gu Nan counted with an expressionless face. He sprinkled his shadow power and activated the law of resurrection again, trying to turn her into a shadow servant. To his surprise, he actually failed this time. Can the resurrection fail? Gu Nan could not help but raise his eyebrows. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing, but the motionless corpse in front of him told him that it was no joke. Is it because he's too strong, or is it because of the divine path? Gu Nan guessed, but his intuition told him that there must be something he had overlooked. Near the laboratory, Duanmu Sun suddenly opened his eyes, and a terrifying aura surged around him. Even the air rumbled. Sir Duanmu. Zhou Xiaojing's figure instantly appeared, and asked in bewilderment. It was not that they were prepared for this, but Duanmu Sen's sudden explosion was too shocking. It was impossible not to notice it. Someone killed Nianlan. Duanmu Sen's eyes were red. His voice was full of murderous intent, but his face was expressionless. What? Zhou Xiaojing's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. A world breaker had died right in front of their eyes? The enemy's power was not something to be surprised about. What was scary was that he had been able to kill Duanmu Nianlan without anyone noticing. Didn't this mean that the other party could also kill them in secret? Soon, they did not have to worry because a shadow appeared behind Zhou Xiaojing. Their enemy did not look like he was going to kill them in secret. He was going to kill them in the open. Gu Nan, who was in assassination mode, did not use any break spell powers. If he did, he would appear from his hidden shadow. The shadow sword silently appeared. The displacement rule worked again. An infinite number of Gu Nan's shadow stabbed forward. It hit the back of Zhou Xiaojing's neck. Gu Nan had a good memory. He remembered the scene of him fighting Zhou Xiaojing very clearly. This person clearly had a space-related rule. He had to finish him off. Otherwise, there would be a lot of problems in the fight. The shadow rule was too good for an assassin, and Gu Nan was good at it. So, Zhou Xiaojing did not even make a sound. His whole body went limp. Facing Gu Nan, world breakers were not harder to kill than ordinary people. But world breakers were stronger than ordinary people. When they faced life and death, they did not hesitate. King? He attacked at the same time as Duanmu Senator. A knife and a fist came in front of Gu Nan. At the same time, King? He shouted, Gu Nan, if you dare to fight against Xinghai Pavilion, the entire planet Xianwang will be affected by you. Have you thought this through? But Gu Nan just sneered. How strong was Xinghai Pavilion? Sorry, but he only believed in Girl No Return, who was a living example. Plus, from the moment Duanmu Yin became a shadow servant, Gu Nan could not reconcile with them. The only way left was to defeat Xinghai Pavilion. He looked up. King? Their attacks were right in front of him. King? His knife looked like an ordinary short knife. It was no different from a samurai's knife. But Gu Nan could feel a strange aura from it. This was a knife that could cut the soul. Once it hit, it was not just the body that would be hurt. Duanmu Sen's fist was almost the same as his daughter's. It was strong and heavy. No. It was stronger. It was heavier. The divine Tao golden body was indeed extraordinary. After being condensed to the extreme, there was almost nothing it could not break. Its biggest flaw was that it was too difficult to cultivate. But for an old monster like Duanmu Sen, who had lived for countless years and enjoyed the countless resources provided by Xinghai Pavilion, he had no lack of time or resources. But these two attacks still could not threaten Gu Nan. No matter how powerful the attack was, it had to hit the target to be effective. This was not a turn-based game where you could hit the target as long as you threw a skill. Gu Nan disappeared with a flash. His figure had already appeared in front of King? Behind him, the magic-breaking attribute erupted and directly broke the laws around the ladder. What kind of power is this? King? He was in a worse state than Zhou Xiaojing. He died completely under an unknown force. Moreover, after losing the protection of the nomological laws, his body couldn't withstand Gu Nan's punch at all, and it directly exploded from the punch. Blood, flesh, and bones flew everywhere. Not even a complete corpse was left. The power of laws could be condensed, but the power that came from the body was bound to be explosive. Gu Nan stood where he was. Shadow power began to spread out. The two shadow servants began to crawl from Zhou Xiaojing's body. They stood up from Zhou Xiaojing's corpse. O King? There was no corpse. It was more appropriate to say that they crawled out from a pile of flesh. If it's not because of strength, then is it really the divine Tao? Gu Nan looked at the two completely normal shadow servants and could not help but frown slightly. He was still thinking about Duanmu Nianlan and the reason why she could not be resurrected. Corpse exorcism? Duanmu's son looked at the two shadow servants with a straight face. Gu Nan could only roll his eyes at his imagination. At the same time, he ordered the two shadow servants to attack Duanmu's son. Chapter 200. Bam! Bam! With two dull thuds, the two figures that had just condensed in the air were easily blown apart by Duanmu Sen's two punches and turned into two clouds of black mist. Gu Nan could not help but shake his head lightly. Those two clouds of black mist were Wang Xiaojing in his shadow servant form. Zhou Xiaojing and Zhou Xiaojing. These two rank 4 shadow servants were of no use against Duanmu Sen and were almost instantly blasted apart. As expected of the law of torturing noobs, Gu Nan said as he shook his head lightly. It was to be expected that the strength of shadow servants would decline compared to when they were alive, but the strength of a rank 4 shadow servant was far inferior compared to when they were alive. Wang? Even if Zhou Xiaojing and Zhou Xiaojing were slightly weaker than Duanmu Sen, they would not be killed in one move. Their actions just now were equivalent to sending themselves to be killed. The intelligence of the shadow servants is not enough to match the strength of a rank 4. Gu Nan, who had also played the summoning path, saw the problem at a glance. When facing opponents of the same level, the intelligence of the shadow servants was not enough for them to judge what to do because their reactions were not fast enough. Only when facing opponents who were weaker than them or when they had a huge advantage in numbers could they truly unleash their strength. Duanmu Sen looked at Gu Nan from afar and said coldly, Your corpse exorcism is only SOSO. His voice hadn't finished resounding in the air when Gu Nan's figure had already suddenly appeared behind him, and Gu Nan fiercely smashed his fist onto the back of his head. Clang! There was a sound like metal colliding, and Duanmu Sen was sent flying, but he quickly steadied his body and did not seem to be injured. Duanmu Sen's divine Tao golden body was more condensed than his daughter's, and the direction of strengthening seemed to be different, which was focused on defense. Duanmu Sen still had a straight face, but before he could speak, Gu Nan flashed and punched again. After this repeated a few times, he suddenly realized that Gu Nan's movements had stopped, and instead, a long saber had pierced through his abdomen. Wang! The familiar power of the divine spirit saber made Duanmu Sen yell in anger, but he immediately realized Wang was already dead. He abruptly turned around only to see King. He was standing right behind him. His skin was completely dark, and there were even some damaged areas that revealed patches of black. Even the king? Half of his face was split open, and the black mist was slowly repairing his body. But it was in this state that Wang Xian was in. However, his hands did not tremble at all. His eyes were fixed on Duanmu Sr. His attack power hasn't decreased much though, Gu Nan concluded from the side. For a player like him, the main focus of any ability was its actual combat ability. Gu Nan would even try to use the law of resurrection, which was created specifically for the management of the divine kingdom. In the eyes of professional players, there were no useless skills, only players who did not know how to use them. Many people believed that resurrection was useless in actual combat, but after Gu Nan's simple tests, he discovered some advantages. For example, the shadow servants retained most of their abilities, characteristics, and damage from when they were alive. In fact, they did not need defense, because the nature of their shadow bodies determined that they were immortal. Duanmu Sun had killed them once, but pure physical attacks could not destroy their true spirits protected by the law of resurrection, so they could not be completely destroyed. As long as Gu Nan was willing to provide them with the power of shadow, they could be resurrected. Duanmu Sun, whose divine soul had been injured, punched again. Shadow Servant King? Before it could even make a sound, it was instantly smashed into pieces, but then it reappeared. It's too much of a waste of power. Gu Nan recreated Wang Xian. Then, he felt the consumption of this skill and shook his head again. Although this bit of power was nothing to him, he could achieve better results with the same amount of power in his hands. The greatest function of the law of resurrection was probably to provide him with a variety of means. Gu Nan controlled Wang Xian to die. He stroked his chin and muttered to himself, "In the future, if there are any strange or interesting laws, I can refine them into shadow servants." He had to admit that the summoning style had its merit. As Wang Xian died, Duanmu Sun gradually became weaker. After his death, Duanmu Sun also gradually became weaker. In a sense, the divine sense saber was the bane of his golden body of divine Tao, especially after it fell into Gu Nan's hands. The divine soul blade originally had the characteristic of hurting others and oneself, but now it could be used at will without any regard for its own body, which was equivalent to greatly increasing its power. The Shinto cultivator Duanmu Sun was already roaring in anger. He had never seen such a shameless way of fighting from Gu Nan. He could clearly fight him head-on, but he only used the fearless corpse-driving technique to exhaust him. Once he chased after him, he would run far away. This was simply. Duanmu Sun, who had been upright all his life, did not know how to describe it. If Gu Nan knew his mental cultivation method, he would definitely tell him that it was called farming. Players most hoped to find a way to exchange health without any damage, because once they found it, they could repeat the process indefinitely until the monster died. And Gu Nan's sufficiently fast speed guaranteed that he was not afraid of random aggro. After a short while, Duanmu Sun finally could not stand this humiliation anymore. He suddenly roared into the sky, and the statue behind him suddenly shone with golden light. "Where do you think you're going?" Duanmu Sun's speed suddenly increased by a notch, and he instantly appeared in front of Gu Nan with unparalleled golden light. But Gu Nan's movements were faster than him, and he did not hesitate to counterattack, hitting Duanmu Sun right in the face. Just as Duanmu Sun burned most of his power of faith to increase his speed, Gu Nan suddenly stopped running, and before his opponent could adjust, he attacked. Just like his daughter, even the Shinto golden body could not withstand Gu Nan's strength, and it cracked after the collision. And Gu Nan's injuries were even more severe. Duanmu Sun's backhand punch almost pierced through his chest, breaking more than half of his ribs, and blood flowed continuously from his mouth. But Gu Nan seemed to not feel any pain, and there was a crazed smile on his face as he punched again without any fancy moves. Bam! 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 The two of them exchanged injuries several times in an instant. Duanmu Sun was originally in peak condition, but he was beaten down by Gu Nan, and the statue behind him began to wobble. Meanwhile, Gu Nan's entire body was filled with broken bones, and even the right side of his face had caved in, but he still did not seem to feel it. What was even more strange was that his injuries were still rapidly recovering, and the flesh on his face was growing back at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it was as good as new. He slowly walked forward and looked at the already spent Duanmu Sun with a cold smile. Chapter 201. Gu Nan sat alone in his room in the White Mist headquarters, playing with two strange beads in his hand. Duanmu Sin died in the end, but he didn't die by Gu Nan's hand. He chose to self-destruct. He was indeed a righteous man with a strong personality. Just as Gu Nan guessed, Duanmu Sin couldn't be made into a shadow servant. But after the 4 world breakers died and the inspection team they brought was wiped out by Gu Nan, the people of White Mist found these 2 beads when they were cleaning up the battlefield. The material looks like the Divine Path golden body. Gu Nan picked up one of the beads and knocked it on the table. It was easy for him to come to this conclusion. He had fought with the Duanmu father and daughter before, so he was very familiar with this kind of material that was made with faith power. Can you remember anything? He handed the bead to Duanmu In and asked. Duanmu In was already a shadow servant, but because of Gu Nan's meticulous creation, she still retained a lot of her memory. Fortunately, the clone Z chose wasn't very strong. Otherwise, no matter how much effort Gu Nan put in, he wouldn't be able to make her remember much. Like Wang? Zhou Xiaojing and Zhou Xiaojing later found out that their intelligence wasn't low. Maybe it was because they were world breakers. But this intelligence had nothing to do with their memories. It was more like they were created by the rules. Duanmu In looked at the bead for a long time and finally said, "The Divine Path cultivator's body won't leave the place of worship. This should be a part of the Divine Path golden body." Gu Nan instantly came to an understanding when he heard this. No wonder these 2 couldn't be made into shadow servants after they died. This wasn't their whole body. It was just a part of it. Flower Jade Planet? Gu Nan touched his chin and murmured to himself. This time, Gu Nan didn't need the Evil God Palace's reminder to know that the Duanmu family ancestral tomb, all the clues pointed to must be hiding a big secret. Zwa told him to go to the central planetary region. Maybe that was their destination. Gu Nan had seen too many similar situations in the game. When all the evidence pointed to the same place, there was either a mission or a trap. The players had a simple way to tell if it was a trap. As long as it could trigger an event, it was definitely not a trap. In other words, as long as he could trigger an event, even if it was a trap, he would step into it. As long as they reached the Jade Flower Planet and found the Duanmu family's ancestral tomb, they would be able to trigger the event when there were enough clues. If nothing happened in the end, Gu Nan would choose to turn around and leave, leaving everything unfinished at the last step. "Master, the people in Xinghai Pavilion have all been cleared." A figure appeared beside him and said in a low voice. The inspection team that Xinghai Pavilion sent was led by 2 Break World shadow servants. Even if they were not as strong as they were when they were alive, they were still more than enough to deal with Tier 3 players. Gu Nan gestured for him to leave, but Red Tail appeared at the right time. "Sir, I'm afraid we can't hide this from Xinghai Pavilion." Her face was full of worry, as if she was worried that the army of Xinghai Pavilion would come tomorrow. In fact, not only could they not hide it, but the moment Gu Nan made his move, the news would have already spread back to the Central Star region. After all, the astral realm was a semi-technological plane. Even Qin Xuanji could contact the King of the Deep Sea. It was impossible for the dignified Xinghai Pavilion to not have such means of communication. However, Gu Nan was not worried at all. Xinghai Pavilion will not be stupid enough to continue sending people to their death. In 2 days I will go to the Central Star region. It will be easy for you to choose which side you want to stand on. When Gu Nan went to the Central Star region, he would either submit to Xinghai Pavilion or Xinghai Pavilion would tacitly approve of his existence. Red Tail would not have to worry anymore. Gu Nan's words were straightforward, but it shocked Red Tail. She shook her head repeatedly, but Gu Nan interrupted her. "I don't need your loyalty. I just want you to manage the white fog to what I want it to be, and provide me with what I need," said Gu Nan. "In exchange, I will be your support." Red Tail gradually fell silent. She was sure that Gu Nan was about to leave, so she made it clear. A pure business relationship would be more conducive for him to control the white fog. What she did not know was that Gu Nan had always viewed the white fog in this way. For players, most interactions with NPCs were transactions, which were no different from completing quests and receiving rewards. I understand. Red Tail finally nodded and then smiled. Then, I wish you a smooth journey in the Central Star region, sir. After dealing with the affairs of planet Xianhuang, Gu Nan did not immediately leave for the Central Star region. Instead, he returned to the immortal demon world. This time, he did not return alone. Instead, he brought Lan Si with him. With Gu Nan's current strength, it was not too difficult for him to bring people through the plains, but it would consume a lot of his law power. This will be my future divine kingdom. You can cultivate here for the time being. You can also learn how to manage a divine kingdom, said Gu Nan to Lan Si. Planet Xianhuang was no longer safe. Lan Si had something as important as a divine spark. Naturally, he could not let her stay on planet Xianhuang. On the other hand, Lan Si's cultivation began to reach a bottleneck. The increase of Gu Nan's sin value had slowed down significantly. Using the 10-to-1 time flow in the immortal demon world, he might be able to speed it up. Lan Si just nodded silently. Who should I learn from? After her temperament changed, Lan Si seemed to have become quite enthusiastic about power. More than once, she showed an obvious desire for control. From someone who had a similar experience with you 20 years ago, said Gu Nan with a chuckle. After leaving the shadow bodies in the immortal demon world and handing Lan Si over to Yen Xiaoxiao, Gu Nan tore the space again and began to go to the Central Star area. World breakers and transcendence were two completely different levels of life. Transcendence could not even directly cross the star area, but world breakers had the ability to leave this world. In the endless starry sky, Gu Nan stood directly in it. After finding the coordinates of the Central Star area, his shadow power instantly broke the law, and he stepped into it. However, the moment he entered the Central Star area, 3 lights, 1 gold, 1 blue, and 1 purple, lit up in front of him at the same time. They suddenly came down with unparalleled power. Gu Nan did not even have time to make a sound. He was directly submerged in the 3 colors of light. In front of the space crack that Gu Nan opened, there were 3 figures standing. These 3 people were 2 men and 1 woman. They were all wearing the same Taoist robes. Aside from the different colors, there was no difference. Even the position of the folds was the same. Gu Nan? He is just SOSO. He came to cause trouble for Shanghai Pavilion? Haha. Did he think we would just sit here and wait for him to come to us? The 3 of them talked to each other in the starry sky. They all smiled at the same time. Among them, the woman who spoke last had the most beautiful smile. She did not even try to hide the mockery in her eyes. The last guy who was called a genius was 80 years ago, right? The woman laughed coldly. These foreign idiot. Do they think we will keep sending people to die? Our Shanghai Pavilion style has always been to put out danger. Chapter 202. In popular novels, when the villains faced the legendary protagonists, they would always send out opponents who were just a bit stronger than the protagonists, but not too much stronger. These opponents would continue to give the main character treasures and experience until the main character grew to a point where they could no longer resist. Then, they would obediently surrender. The Shanghai Pavilion had stood in the astral realm for tens of thousands of years. Who knew how many main characters like this had been killed by them, let alone stories like this? That was why the woman in gold believed that she would never make such a mistake. Their first move was to kill Gu Nan in one blow. Ever since they received news from the 6th galaxy and guessed that Gu Nan might come to the central galaxy, they had been lying in ambush and waiting. Now, their prey had finally fallen into their trap. But what did their expressions mean? The woman in gold felt a chill run down her spine when she saw the expressions on her 2 companions' faces. She had thought that the 3 of them were lions hunting a rabbit, but the rabbit would bite. Watch out! Her two companions' voices finally came. Their help had also arrived, but it seemed to be a little too late. A chill gradually appeared on her waist. She felt as if a poisonous snake had attached itself to her and was slowly crawling up her body. Of course, this was just her imagination. Gu Nan's sword had only lightly scratched her body, and the chill did not linger for long. Instead, it went straight for the man in blue. Gu Nan's grasp of the situation had always been the best. He was the kind of person who could make the most accurate judgments in any battle. That was why when he was surrounded by the three of them, he instantly determined who was the biggest threat to him. Oh no, his target is me. The man in blue had been trying to help his companions, but he did not expect Gu Nan to suddenly change his target and come for him. He turned his hand and created a layer of blue shadow in front of him. At the same time, he quickly retreated in an attempt to dodge. But Gu Nan, who had finally revealed himself, did not give his opponent any chance to live. With the help of the spell-breaking ability, he almost instantly broke through the blue shadow and punched the man in the face. The man in blue was clearly not like the Duanmu father and daughter, who walked the path of divinity and had an unparalleled physical body. His greatest strength was his Dao technique. Unfortunately, in the face of Gu Nan's magic-breaking attribute, his Dao technique was completely useless. When he was punched by Gu Nan, his face caved in at a speed visible to the naked eye. The scene seemed to freeze at this moment. No! The blue-clothed man could see his two companions shouting loudly behind Gu Nan with one of his uninjured eyes. It was a pity that sound couldn't be transmitted in the starry sky. At this critical moment, no one thought of using sound transmissions. He was destined to be unable to hear these final shouts. Bang! Gu Nan swung his fist again, hitting the other side of the blue-clothed man's face, causing his head to explode. No matter how strong a break-world person's life force was, they could not survive in a situation like this. That was because Gu Nan's power already had a breaking feature. Even his god's soul was broken. The magic-breaking crystal's power was unparalleled, but without its existence, Gu Nan would have chosen the same path. In his original plan, the second or third rule column would have created rules that made his body a rule or a pure breaking power. The purpose of both of them was the same. It was to help Gu Nan break his opponent's rule and prevent him from escaping. He would use pure physical power to win. When his power reached a certain level, even if it was just his body, it was enough to affect the rules. The blue-clothed man had been killed by Gu Nan in one move. Ever since Gu Nan had entered the central system, he had been ambushed and killed. All of that had happened in the blink of an eye. Everything had happened too fast. It was so fast that the other two could not react. When they looked again, Gu Nan had already turned around with a cold smile. They noticed that Gu Nan was not unharmed. On the contrary, his wounds were shockingly bad. His heart, throat, and the right side of his face all had bloody holes. Clearly, the three of them had ambushed him. In fact, no matter who it was, they would think that the three of them had prepared flawlessly. Not only had their plan been well concealed, but they had also deliberately chosen a space-time node where Gu Nan could travel through space and was unguarded. As soon as Gu Nan appeared, he was immediately attacked by the three of them. No matter how one looked at it, there was no reason for him to survive. After all, after Duanmu Sen and the others had died at Gu Nan's hands, the three of them still dared to ambush him. This was enough to prove their strength. In terms of one-on-one combat, almost none of them were weaker than Duanmu Senator. Moreover, once the three of them joined forces and complemented each other's strengths, their combat power would far exceed theirs. However, no one had expected that Gu Nan would survive the three of them's all-out attacks. Moreover, he still had the strength to kill one of them in an instant. In the next moment, Gu Nan's figure disappeared. The man and woman stood back to back as if they were facing a formidable enemy. They looked around cautiously. However, after waiting for a long time, Gu Nan did not appear again. Instead, they heard a faint sigh from the bottom of their hearts. Calm in the face of danger and decisive. He's indeed extraordinary. A middle-aged man slowly walked out of the void. There seemed to be some regret on his face, as expected of the person who could make Buddha return empty-handed. There was still a faint glow on his hand, as if he had just attacked. When the man and woman saw the middle-aged man, they hurriedly went forward and bowed. Greetings, Pavilion Master Jiu. There were only 3 pavilion masters in Shanghai Pavilion. Within Shanghai Pavilion, the 3 pavilion masters were addressed differently. Pavilion Master Jiu's real name was indeed Yu Jiu. However, both inside and outside of Shanghai Pavilion, he was addressed as Pavilion Master Jiu and not Pavilion Master Yu. Pavilion Master Jiu, can Xiaohua still be saved? The woman in gold could not care less and asked directly. Xiaohua was naturally the man in blue. Yu Jiu sighed and said, I'm a step too late. He was indeed a step too late. Otherwise, even if he could not save the man in blue, he would definitely be able to make Gu Nan stay. Injuries were injuries after all. No matter how fast they healed, they would definitely affect the battle. Hearing Yu Jiu's answer, the woman in gold could not help but cry. The 3 of them had been in the Star Ocean for hundreds of years. They did not expect that because of today's negligence. Lord Jiu, do you know where Gu Nan went? The eyes of the man in purple were also red. He suppressed the grief and indignation in his heart. Why? Do you think that not enough people have died? Yu Jiu shouted. His cold expression made the 2 of them silent. After a moment of silence, he spoke again. You 2 go back to the pavilion first. Someone will naturally deal with Gu Nan. Yes, Pavilion Master. The man and woman could only respond helplessly. However, when they turned around, they looked at each other and saw the unwillingness and hatred in each other's eyes. Chapter 203. In the endless starry sky, the man and woman in the 2-colored robes had disappeared, leaving Yu Jiu alone with the dazzling galaxy. However, just a moment later, a figure appeared behind him. It was a person that no one would have thought would appear with him. It was the reincarnated Buddha, the young girl No Gue who chose to become a demon, and Yi Chen who followed her. She was also the young girl who was rumored to have caused a ruckus in Shanghai Pavilion, killed the Heavenly Secret Path Master, and humiliated Shanghai Pavilion. However, she was now standing together with one of the 3 pavilion masters of Shanghai Pavilion. It was completely unlike what some people thought, that the 2 of them would fight when they met. You have the chance to make him stay. The first sentence that young girl No Gue said was a cold and doubtful expression. At this moment, Yu Jiu had a faint smile on his face. What's in it for me to make him stay? If he really grows to that point, Shanghai Pavilion won't be the first to suffer. It seems that you know him very well. Young girl No Gue still had a cold expression, but there was some hesitation in her eyes. She rarely paid attention to Gu Nan. Even when she had just woken up and Gu Nan already had considerable strength, she still did not pay attention to him. This was because this awakened Buddha knew very well that the progress of his strength would far exceed the imagination of ordinary people, enough to leave everyone behind. It was not until the battle in the immortal demon world that she truly realized that this young man was not simple. He could even be the representative of some big shot. Facing this question, Yu Jiu just smiled and said nothing. Very few people knew that when Gu Nan had just become famous, this high and mighty pavilion master of Shanghai Pavilion had already paid attention to him. Even Gu Nan's title back then was decided by Yu Jiu himself. Similarly, he was also the one who made the star seal and asked Zhou Xiaojing to send it to Gu Nan. However, Shui Yin intervened midway, which was a completely different matter. Of course, with Gu Nan's speed of advancement, the honor that Shanghai Pavilion provided for other powerhouses, such as titles and star seals, were all a joke. More often than not, he would do something even more sensational as soon as they gave him the honor. The plan could not keep up with the changes. Based on Yu Jiu's level, Although the current Gu Nan was powerful, it was not to the extent that he could not defeat him. But how long had it been? Yu Jiu, who had personally witnessed his growth, could not help but shake his head in his heart. He did not think that there was a need for Shanghai Pavilion to make such a person their enemy. Just like how he could cooperate with young girl No Return, he could also cooperate with Gu Nan, as long as there was a need for both sides to cooperate. However, we'll have to see if he can survive this ordeal. The 9th Pavilion Master felt a slight chill in his heart. This year, the Star Divinity Shrine will be opening. I want a spot. No Gue did not continue to harp on Gu Nan's question and changed the topic to her purpose. The 3 words, Galaxy Divinity Temple, made Yu Jiu frown slightly. He didn't like dealing with some old monsters precisely because they knew too much. Shanghai Pavilion's prosperity was largely due to its long history and mystery. The Star Divinity Temple is useless to you, right? Yu Jiu said in a deep voice. Young girl No Return did not speak. She only tilted her head slightly and signaled Yi Chen to speak. Yi Chen did not disappoint. He displayed the bearing of a young hero and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Yi Chen greets the 9th Pavilion Master. Huaqiong Planet. As one of the main planets in the central starfield, Huaqiong Planet was an administrative planet with highly advanced technology. It was more prosperous than Red Carp and also had a strong military force that was not inferior to Xianhuang Planet. On this planet where martial arts prevailed, all kinds of martial arts competitions were often held. People would choose this method to solve all kinds of problems, big or small. Even if you went to the market to buy vegetables and the vegetable seller gave you 20 cents less, you could settle it through a duel. Whoever won would get to decide. Martial arts was a gift from the heavens. The older generation of Huaqiong Planet often said this. Therefore, until now, the most common sentence here was still, let's duel. On this day, it was still a fulfilling day, filled with martial arts competitions. Zhou Jingwen carried a heavy school bag and walked on the road, kicking the stones on the side of the road. Life is so boring. The female high school student Zhou Jingwen looked up at the sky and sighed. Regardless of gender, Zhou Jingwen was like all children of her age. She craved adventure, excitement, and anything that could bring her to the peak of her life. However, such thoughts would only linger in her mind for a while. Very soon, they would be destroyed by the cruel reality. Even if she was cultivating martial arts, she had to go home and do her homework. Ouch! Zhou Jingwen, who was walking on the road, suddenly felt that she was tripped by something. Her whole body fell forward. Fortunately, she had some martial arts foundation, so she did not fall flat on her face. She turned around angrily to see what had tripped her. However, when she saw the thing at the intersection, she was shocked. It was clearly a person. No, to be precise, it should be a humanoid creature because there was a big hole in the person's neck and chest. How could there be someone who could survive like that? However, she could clearly see that the person was moving slowly, as if he was trying to get up bit by bit. Could it be a zombie from a movie? Zhou Jingwen had never seen any peerless experts, but she had watched many movies. Not really. A cold but clear voice came. Zhou Jingwen looked up in shock, only to see that the person had stood up and was looking at her calmly. She then realized that not only was his neck and heart pierced, but even his head was missing a piece. She could still see the moving brain inside. Zhou Jingwen, who had never seen such a scene, felt that she was about to vomit. She suspected that it was the effect of makeup, but the strong smell of blood that came over made her realize that it was real. This is Huaqiong Planet? The voice came again. This time, Zhou Jingwen saw clearly that it was the strange person in front of her who was speaking. How could this person, who was missing half of his head, speak so calmly? Zhou Jingwen resisted the urge to close her eyes. After complaining in her heart, her eyes couldn't help but light up. Who said that she was going to live her life peacefully like this? Wasn't there an expert who descended from the sky? Who would have thought that such a miracle would happen to me, Zhou Jingwen? When the girl thought of this, she immediately ignored the blood stains on the person's body and grabbed his arm, afraid that he would run away. Yes, yes, Senior. Zhou Jingwen's eyes were filled with excitement. Senior, you must have been chased by your enemies and ended up on our planet, am I right? Do you need medicine the most right now? If there's anything you need my help with, please let me know. However, the senior in her eyes shook his head lightly and said, I don't need medicine. If you're interested, you can help me find a name. This person was naturally Gu Nan. When he said this, he was looking at the evil divine palace in her mind. Chapter 204. In the Evil God game, the Sin event was a very unique setting. Like other games, the Evil God game had its own mission system. However, the designer was ingenious and designed the mission system as a Sin event model. Unlike the normal process of accepting a mission and doing a mission, the Sin events were almost all triggered. The players had to find a trigger point before they could receive the mission. However, on the other hand, the players could also use this logic to determine which events were beneficial to them. The Sin event would reward Sin points, so the target of the Sin event must be related to it and related to the players leveling up. The Godhead Chain incident back then was a clear proof of this. Therefore, for an experienced player like Gu Nan, the Sin event was more like a signpost, indicating that there was something nearby that could help him level up. Shadow Song. Gu Nan muttered the name softly and frowned slightly. He couldn't even tell if the person was a person or an item based on the name alone, so he could only search slowly. However, for an experienced player of the Evil God game, searching for a needle in a haystack was a common thing, so he was already used to it. In fact, his top priority now was to take care of his injuries. The people from Shanghai Pavilion weren't stupid. Those three guys dared to ambush him, so they were indeed capable. The combined attack of the three of them was very powerful, and they chose the moment when Gu Nan couldn't escape when he traveled through space, so they heavily injured him almost instantly. However, it was a pity that Gu Nan had a godly skill like blunting. The so-called heavily injured state actually didn't affect his combat power. It was this skill that gave Gu Nan the characteristic of, even if I only had 1 drop of HP, my attack power would be the same as when I was at full HP in traditional games. This was the main reason why he could turn the tables. If it was someone else who was heavily injured like this, they wouldn't be able to fight back at all. To make matters worse, after he insta-killed the man in blue, before he could turn around, he sensed a more dangerous person approaching. Fortunately, the perception of the Shadow Rule was very high, so Gu Nan was able to escape in advance. However, when that person saw that he couldn't catch up to Gu Nan, he also left behind some methods to suppress Gu Nan's self-recovery ability, so that his injuries couldn't heal quickly. No, it's more like the wounds are getting deeper. Gu Nan felt the injuries on his body, and made his own judgment. His self-healing speed did not slow down, but every time the wound healed a little, it would split open a little again, and this cycle repeated itself. Although his recovery speed was still slightly faster, the time it took for him to fully recover was greatly delayed. Out of habit, Gu Nan wanted to touch the back of his head, but a part of his head was missing. Strange law, this is a bit like a curse? There were all sorts of strange laws in the world, and Gu Nan did not dare to say that he knew all of them. He could only say that he had seen most of them. This strange phenomenon was similar to the damage amplification curse that he remembered. Right now, Gu Nan was in a bungalow. Zhou Jingwen was laboriously carrying a large pile of things in. It was all medicine, food, and drink. Senior, let's eat something first. Zhou Jingwen came over with a fawning expression. She felt that Gu Nan had just been chased, so he definitely needed to replenish his energy the most. Gu Nan did not ignore her. He had always felt that his personality was quite normal. He looked at the things in her hands and said, "It doesn't taste good." In reality, Gu Nan's evil god body was not used to obtaining energy through food, and he could only eat to satisfy his appetite. Therefore, not eating things that didn't taste good was the truth for Gu Nan. Of course, he did not need medicine. His recovery speed was not actually restricted, but the wounds were constantly expanding. This bit of medicine was just a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. "I don't need these." He casually pushed aside half of the medicine and said to Zhou Jingwen with only half of his head, "Help me find clues about Shadow Song, and I will give you a reward." Zhou Jingwen, who had a gloomy expression, heard this and her eyes immediately lit up. Wasn't this the reason why she came to get close to him? Zhou Jingwen did not mind Gu Nan's coldness at all, and even imagined that this was how an expert should be. Not caring about human feelings, only talking about benefits. "I understand," she said excitedly. "I will be back at this time tomorrow. Please give me this opportunity, please." As she spoke, she made a 90-degree bow. This posture made Gu Nan feel a little strange, and he thought of the people of a certain small country in his previous life. However, he had seen many different worlds and civilizations, so he did not take it to heart. Zhou Jingwen quickly left, leaving only Gu Nan in the small bungalow. When he arrived on planet Huaqiong, it was already evening, and now the night was even darker. When Zhou Jingwen returned home, she would probably be taught a good lesson by her parent. As night fell, Gu Nan just sat quietly in the darkness, enjoying the peace that the night brought him. That guy. I might not be able to defeat him in a head-on battle. Gu Nan's eyes flashed, and he sighed softly in the darkness. The person he was referring to was naturally the person who had cursed him in the previous battle. Gu Nan's spell-breaking ability was almost invincible among level 4 fighters, but it was not truly invincible. He did not think that he would meet someone who had a way to counter it so quickly. Curses could indeed counter the spell-breaking ability, and this had to do with the mechanism of the curse. Curses had a continuous effect, and even if Gu Nan continued to use his spell-breaking ability, the curse would still continue to take effect. Unless the root of the problem was dealt with, it would be meaningless. Moreover, that person's strength was probably at the peak of level 4. There were probably not many people like that in Shanghai Pavilion. However, Gu Nan was still fearless. Even if he could not defeat him in a head-on fight, it did not mean that he could not defeat him in a sneak attack. With Gu Nan's skills, it would be a waste not to become an assassin. As long as he could succeed in his sneak attack, the first wave of damage would be enough to make any opponent of the same level suffer. In game terms, Gu Nan was like a player who specialized in the skills of an assassin, while Yu Jiu was a dark mage with a full set of godly equipment. Gu Nan did not have much of a chance of winning in the arena, but in the wild, he had plenty of ways to torture his opponent to death. When I recover from this injury, Gu Nan's eyes were cold. Oh, I'll complete the mission first. Maybe I can unlock the third rule. Although he was a little unhappy that he had been tricked by the NPC, his rationality still prevailed. The crime was right in front of him, and he had no reason not to do it. Moreover, if he could unlock the third rule, he could simply hang his opponent up and beat him up.